Time is now 6:32. I'm Chairman Mike Currie, and I'd like to call this Board of Selectmen workshop to order on this fourth day of December 2019. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to state for the record that the entire proceeding this evening, except any executive sessions, which we wouldn't have in a workshop, are being recorded for both TCTV Cable Station 8 and TCTV YouTube channel. If anyone else feels the need to record, just let us know. Thank you. As always, our agenda for this evening has been set no later than 48 hours by law and is publicly available at the official source for town information at templetonma.gov. I would also remind all citizens of our 4 villages to sign up or register for emergency updates using the Code Red system. It's all the way on the left-hand side at the bottom of the web page. I don't think it's changed. And especially now, after 2 feet of snow and all kinds of great messages. Although I've had the discretion as chairperson to add and remove from the agenda, and I will in a second, it has been set to allow for time, personnel resources, and public awareness. I reserve the right to move the agenda items around to see best fit our business and guests. Thank you. Ms. Farrell.
All right. I'm Julie Farrell. I was here a couple of weeks ago in the beginning of November, and we have gathered over 250 signatures to reinstate our bylaw, Article 23. Right now, we're calling it solid waste management. The wording in the first part is exactly the same, and then we've added 2 other sections that we hope will be approved by the Attorney General. This is a call for a special town meeting, which is at your discretion to call once the signatures have been certified. And we need 200.
Okay.
And we've got
Yeah, I believe I have
250.
45 days once that has occurred.
That's my recollection, but I
Yep.
want to check the statute.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, I don't have time to get here during the day.
Get the Gardner News come in and have you hand it to me.
There you go.
I'm not making light of it, Barry. Thank you.
One procedural issue, Mr. Chairman. The bylaw calls for the warrant to be open for 14 days prior to it being finalized, but given this is a special meeting by petition, I don't believe that provision of the bylaw is going to apply, but we'll verify that with council in the next few days.
Okay, that makes sense.
I have one other question about the audit. Is that going to be, the documents that you have before you, is that going to be posted online?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think there's too much that we do that we don't post in some form or fashion online or a little bit more publicly shared and otherwise.
I would say that after Tony makes his presentation, we would be asking, obviously, this will be the first night you're seeing this, we would ask the advisory committee, we would ask this body to send us any questions within 2 weeks. And once we've responded to that, if any adjustments are needed, then we would publish it once it was final.
Makes
So,
sense?
In about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Right, yeah, I mean, again, I mean, it's great that we have the advisory committee with us tonight, but yes, given some time.
Thank you.
Great. Is there any other public comment?
Thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to go because I have to go cook stuff.
Okay.
Sorry. But I'm
Okay.
glad this meeting is recorded.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Okay, we're going to move into our workshop agenda, presentations and discussion tonight. With us this evening, we've got the advisory committee. Thank you for all coming. You know, it was a little bit of a delay getting to this point, but I'm glad that we're able to have this discussion tonight. So we have, and it's great that we have it, do you have the same packet? Or, so just packet materials, obviously, we have the agenda, and then right behind that is the letter with the goals. I thought it would be good to have some open discussion and, if necessary, review the goals to, kind of take a swipe at them. Like how we can achieve them together, whether they're best suited for individual boards or discussion of any kind of ad hoc committee. But certainly, the floor is open to have this discussion. Do you want to set the stage at all? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in October, we sent the Board of Selectmen an email requesting that an ad hoc committee be organized, or what's the right word I'm looking for? Created. With everything that went on this year with the school budget, it's quite obvious that there's an imbalance in what Templeton pays for Narragansett Regional School District and what Phillipston pays. And since we're all Templeton residents, we're very concerned that the town is paying more than its fair share for certain schools, i.e. Phillipston Elementary School. With some quick numbers that I was given, it's in the neighborhood of $450,000 that this town could desperately use. So with that, we think that it's important to form a committee to basically what's listed here. It kind of in a quick summation would be is having a municipal school district or regional school district what's best for Templeton. I think as a committee, we all feel fairly strongly about this, that the Narragansett Regional School District agreement needs to be addressed, and that this committee would go, depending on its outcome of what's best for Templeton, would then potentially go into addressing that, opening that, and getting it right so that the town of Templeton is properly served. Anybody else? Did I get everything you want?
So, again, the text of it certainly seemed like the framework for setting it up in goals and questions, right?
Yep.
So, I believe I wrote it down in the last one. I was concerned about scope. You have to forgive me, I gotta turn to it, sorry. Not sure if you had the chance to watch it or any of the comments that we had in our last meeting about it.
I did not.
Okay. I think in the formation of a committee, if that's what we wind up deciding on, I think we get it done a lot quicker and more efficiently if we wind up having that structure. You and I spent a lot of time in the military with structured reports. You have an introduction, you have purpose, scope, and otherwise. If we get to that point, that's how I'd like to see it arranged. And then all of your questions and your goals are basically encapsulated within those. I'll find it eventually. Here we go. Purpose, scope, makeup, duration, and frequency. I knew I'd find it. Oh, you had it? You didn't save me? And Terry had mentioned, so we talk about the makeup, that we had some at-large members. What are your thoughts on at-large members rather than just who, the bright and smiling faces we see right here?
I think it's great.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Personally feel it's advantageous.
Yeah? Does anyone, does anyone want to kind of talk through, take these one of the, so makeup. The first thing, do we think that this is a good idea to take some time to do that?
I see.
Yeah.
things here, But just real quickly, I will add, if the Board of Selectmen is gonna vote on creating an ad hoc committee, page 5 of the Board of Selectmen Policies and Procedures, it outlines all such advisory committees shall be established by the adoption of a document to be entitled Charge Composition, draft of which is to be prepared for the board by the administrator, identify types of persons, lawyer, banker, realtor, etc., resident in writing, and shall include the work to be undertaken, the time in which it to be accomplished, and the procedures for reporting to the board. Now, that's the requirements that the Board of Selectmen is supposed to follow if we're gonna have an ad hoc committee.
Mhm.
So, just listening to, what kind of people you're gonna have on there and stuff. If we vote to do this, if we're gonna in fact follow, our own policies.
Yes.
Then, to me, that's where it would have to start. We would have to vote, if, one, do we wanna create an ad hoc committee? And two, if it's yes, then, town administrator, another thing on your to-do list, or
This one I actually have in the can, I just would need to know how many people you would want, where those stakeholders would come from, and when you wanted to try to get the report by. And the rest of it, Jeff,
I have a question.
with this as a cut and paste, I think we could do it in relatively short order once we had the answer to the basic questions in terms of how many people and what kinds of people.
Okay.
And
think we're
Tony
getting
was
there.
on the Baldwinville, so I think he's seen a charge for a committee such as this.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, two things. If we can't come up with the people, is it something that the advisory committee could do and then report to us? Is it something that they could take on and report all their findings to us? Is that something that they could do? I know we have trouble finding people for committees, so I'm just wondering what the best thing, because I did read that they could do it and report to us, and then, go ahead, sorry.
Please.
No, I just have a question. I thought the district agreement had certain rules to open it up.
It does.
And to who can open it up and
Right.
go to the district.
It may not be within the scope, but that's what I wanted to discuss.
Right, and I don't have the, Jeff, do you have the district agreement with you?
yes, I do. Well, yes, I do.
Okay, so I thought that there were some certain guidelines as to who could open up the district agreement.
So,
And-
we're not asking to open the district agreement yet?
I wrote that down
Okay,
when you were speaking.
that's not, no, we said if an ad hoc committee comes to the
Conclusion.
conclusion, thank you, I just not thinking
Yeah.
today, to the conclusion that the district agreement needs to be looked at.
Well, how else do
We-
you figure out, like, what you want the district agreement to say, what you need to utilize in the future for it, if you don't have someone to look at it prior to opening it?
We've already asked to open the district agreement as a board to the school committee, and Phillipston has asked to open it as well. We've
it's
already
open.
asked
But
for
it's
that.
two different things. You can
Right.
analyze it, you can read it, you can interpret it, but in terms of opening it as a operative word.
I don't think
yeah.
it was meant as the group would, the ad hoc would
Yeah.
open it. It was to investigate all of the bullet points in order to know what you need changed in it. How do you,
Okay.
how do you attack an agreement like that, not knowing every avenue that you need to look at for the town, so that it benefits you the most, so that you're just opening it once, and then in 5 years, you're doing it again. But
Right.
you have that 5-year period covered. So instead of, I was just making sure everyone has the baseline of what you want in it before you open it.
Real quickly, it doesn't specify in the table of contents, if you will, about opening the agreement. It does address amendments, which I would assume that would be something you want to talk
Amending the
about,
document,
changing
right.
the document. And it says
Right.
an amendment may be proposed by a vote of the regional district school committee or by a vote of any town meeting of any member town.
Okay, because
So-
we had asked to open it at a meeting here in this room.
No, at town meeting, if you
Okay,
ask town
so we
meeting,
have to-
if they vote to do that, because,
Okay.
you know, town meeting is
So
the
we
one
can
who
analyze it.
appropriates the monies to
Okay.
join the district. So it
Okay.
doesn't really speak to opening, but if you
Okay.
want to do amendments, that's where that would start.
Okay.
But I don't think their intent was to make amendments, it was just to look at the agreement itself and all the ins and outs of it. And then if an amendment is perhaps needed or something, that would be the next, I believe that's.
Okay,
what
I wrote
Exactly.
down looking at all the
That was
bullet
fine.
points.
So Mike, to your bullet purpose, it would be to understand the agreement.
Yeah.
Because
Better word.
I mean, you read it one time and you're not gonna, if you're not
Yeah.
a school
Right. It's not easy.
government person,
so
how
I
are
would-
you gonna even know what
Carrie,
to look?
I would
for?
probably take that a little further. To understand the agreement
Purpose, to understand,
and to ensure that the town of Templeton is properly represented in that agreement.
and ensure.
I mean,
They-
we're
I don't
doing,
wanna
it's like we're
misquote what
doing
you-
our own study, our own analysis. And we're forming a committee to do a study, whereas we would pay somebody else to do that.
Right.
Jeff, could you, what was the last
If
part of
I'm
that
saying
for
something
opening?
wrong,
I'm
correct
sorry
me,
that you
okay.
No,
you
that's
put it
okay.
all
Okay.
away.
No.
It had to have been, by the school committee?
It's either a vote by the school committee, or
A
an
vote by the
amendment may be
town.
proposed by vote of the regional district school committee, or by vote of any town meeting of any member town. So either Phillipston or Templeton
Is that a
town
vote
meeting.
to open it, or is it, you're
Amend it.
opening, it, amend it?
Amend it.
Amend it, so you,
Propose an amendment.
Thi-
We
Propose an
propose
amendment.
to
this body
change-
would, whether it's by petition to come through as a warrant, but this body would wind up creating the amendment, and then it would be taken care of by town meeting.
Correct. So
Okay.
the way this goes is technically, there's no opening the agreement. So there's a review clause in there that's supposed to happen every 5 years, which can propose amendments from the committee to. There's a one-off where the committee can propose an amendment to the two towns for a single issue. Or either town can have a town meeting warrant article that proposes one or more amendments. That goes to the school committee, which then is supposed to forward it to the other town, which then has to place it on their warrant, and then you go through the amendment process.
Yeah, 'cause we both have
So I
to-
can see this process that we're discussing, developing recommendations that would basically morph into that process. So that's good to know.
Mr. Roselli is
Yep,
with us at
yep.
any time.
Does anyone mind just postponing? Not that long at all. Mr. Roselli, how are you? Mike Currie.
A lot of new faces.
Good evening.
Nice to see and hopefully meet everybody.
Hi, Tony.
Hi Diane.
How are you?
Carter.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
This
Someone
evening, we
missing?
have the advisory committee is with us tonight by invitation, so it's actually great that they're here
good.
to hear your audit. So we definitely appreciate that. So yes, Jeff Bennett, I'm not sure if you've known him before.
I've heard the name.
Okay.
That's a good thing or not?
Terry and I are new on the board. Terry Griffiths, Mike Currie, Diane, Bob May, Faith Curcio, Amy Guthrie, and Tony DeJoy. How's that for being put on the
Yeah,
spot?
it is.
Don't,
I almost-
don't ask me these
Wow.
names at the end of the meeting.
Well, you've got our attention.
All
Thank you
right,
for being
super.
here this evening. I know it's a little bit of a mess out there. 2 feet. Where are you from?
I was actually in Phillipston having a meeting there, and I was in Southbridge earlier today, meeting with them, not an exit meeting, but something else. So I live in Topsfield, so
Okay.
I said, let me
Been
do the
all
whole
over
western,
today.
let me do the western swing in 2 feet of snow. It did take me an hour and 20 minutes to drive from Southbridge to Phillipston, and it's only about 40 miles. It was
Right.
very, very slow.
Yeah, normally 45,
we got
50
some-
It was
minutes.
slick. So, it is what it is. Glad to get it over with. Usually we're having these meetings in May or June, so some of the good news is that, hey, we're having a meeting here on December 4th, I think this is the earliest that the audit has been completed. I don't know how it was done back 10 years ago, but in at least the last 10 years, this is the earliest that the,
Generally about April we'd hear about it.
yeah.
Somewhere around there.
So that's good. You know, the financial team put together a pretty decent package, allowed us to get through the audit. We only had to do one audit instead of 5 all at once, like we had to do a couple of years ago. It's nice to do them one at a time. We saw that the town maintained its bond rating last year, and which will help you, you know, with any future borrowings. That was another nice highlight. There was a concern that the town's bond rating would drop because of all the problems that had happened, but you managed to maintain the bond rating. So that's good news. And the first report we had was about 40 pages. It's down to about 8 or 9 pages, so that's good news also. There are still some things that need to be worked out, some things that are in progress. But overall, the town is trending in the right direction. So that's good news.
Thank you.
So on page 2, we can look at some of the financial,
Are we looking at the management letter,
The
Tony?
management letter, yeah.
Okay.
yeah. I kind of highlight what's important in here. If we want to get into the last report, you know, we can ask specific
No,
questions
I just
about
wanted to
that.
know what we were going through.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
page 2 of the smaller report, which is the management letter. So the unassigned fund balance, which is basically defined as any stabilization funds that you have, plus the undesignated fund balance, sort of free cash, but not quite, added together. That's what the unassigned fund balance is. That reached 2.6 million, which is about 18% of your general fund expenses. Now, just to let you know where 18% stands, the S&P, which is one of the rating companies out there that rates bonds, considers 15% to be excellent. So you folks have hit 18%, whereas 3 years ago it was negative, like 2% or negative 3%. So the process of managing the budget, managing your receipts, collections have brought you to a place where it's pretty good right now. So you're at like I said, 18% of expenses. That's an important highlight to note. And you can ask questions as we go. This is the third, as I said, 4 years ago, not 3 years ago, but 4 years ago, the town was in the negative. And each of the last 3 years, it's gone up to the point where we are now. And we also talk about the bond rating here, which we've also talked about. The town did maintain its A1 rating, which it had way back in 14. So again, that's good news. The higher the rating, the more favorable your financing costs are. Another important item, your management team, town administrator, your accountant have now been together for 4 years. Whereas you had 3 or 4 town managers over a 5-year period. You had, I lost count, maybe 5 or 6 accountants. You had guys coming in for a cup of coffee and gone. That led to a lot of problems. The continuity is important, and that's why things are better now, because there is continuity. The team's been together. The treasurer has been here, I believe, 2 years? 2.5 years. The treasurer's been here 2.5 years. So keeping the team together has been important and has led to some of this, because you kind of each learn your different idiosyncrasies. You learn to work together better, and that's going in the right direction also. The town also this year, I learned, regionalized the town accounting department. So now you're providing services to Hubbardston. Think about that.
And Phillipston.
And, well, Phillipston's, but
No,
Phillipston's not.
just Hubbardston.
No. She works in
I'm sorry.
Phillipston, but.
I'm sorry. Ixnay on the Phillipston end.
So think about that. Think about that. 4 years ago, you couldn't get out of your own way
Right,
on the accounting side. You could
right.
not
No, we
turn
couldn't.
a light switch on and find your way out of the building.
I'm probably the only
Really?
person on the board who's been through that.
And now you're providing services to a neighboring community.
Loss.
I mean, it's at a loss.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know the numbers, but you're providing services to a neighboring
you're gonna say
community.
it's so good you had a loss for words.
And, again, that just, that just is something else, to look at, that another community is confident in the ability that you can provide that community. A community that had its own set of issues and
People
problems.
wouldn't even look at the town of Templeton. Do you remember that, Tony? We were just a bad
I
name.
turned the job down 3 times.
I,
3 times I turned it down. I got calls and I said, no,
well,
I
thank you
don't.
for coming back.
I was dealing with the other one up north.
Yes, you
And
are.
when I got through that, I finally said, I have some time, I'll go to Templeton. But I did turn it down a few times. And you finally did hire somebody that was, just the money was so, much to do it, that I said, I gotta go help them. Let me go help them. And we're in a good spot. I'm glad I did that, and we're in a good spot. And everyone's kind of rallied together to get there. So that's kind of the overview of what's happened, where things are at. Let's talk about some of the management letter comments now. First of all, the statement on auditing standards, which is number 115, addresses how to communicate to governance, and it defines material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and control deficiencies. Material weaknesses are the worst. Then the significant deficiencies are second. Control deficiencies are basically recommendations. They're not as severe. What I have found in this report this year, and I think last year also, there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, whereas 3 years ago, there were
There were many.
7 or 8. I mean, there were a lot. I don't remember the count, but there were a lot. So all those have gotten to the point, the bank reconciliations weren't being done, reports weren't being done timely, receivable reconciliations weren't being done, deposits weren't made timely. A lot of things that were material weaknesses are now gone. There's a better process in place. You've got policies and procedures that you did through the compact cabinet that have been approved. Efforts have been streamlined. So again, there was no reason for me to write down any material weaknesses in this year's audit or significant deficiencies. So what we have here is really control deficiencies, but less severe type, that still need to be fixed, still need to be worked on, and there's still findings, but they're not quite as severe as we've had in the past. One of my first, and I've still got this under informational item, network security. So last year, we subcontracted a security specialist to come in and look at the town's security situation. As you're aware, towns are getting hit left and right with ransomware, and their operations are being frozen for days at a time. They're losing time, they're losing money, and it's costing them to get out of that situation. So last year, Templeton decided to, let's address what we have, let's see if there's problems, and this was done through a executive session, so that the items would not be public. A report was written. Hopefully Carter still has the report. And there's a new board now. It may make sense to share that at some point in executive session, just to go over the points that were in that report. I don't think we should talk about them in this public session. But I did note that nothing's been done since then. So that's important. We need to address that. We need to go through it. You don't want to be the next town that's on the cover of the Worcester Telegram and Gazette saying, so-and-so wants $200,000 or whatever. You don't want that. So that's something that you really need to address.
I know that we had a more robust IT budget within this last year, in terms of expenditures or otherwise, but I know that's been on our plate.
That had, however, been placed on hold pending resolution of what the school budget was
Right.
going to be. And hopefully we can now get back on that.
Yep.
And to decide between the two finalists as to
Yeah.
which one to
Yep.
bring in for managed services.
We had several capital items that we were trying to address exactly what you're talking about, and we just got on the other side of a little bit of a budget battle that we're doing okay now. But
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully the
Great
next audit,
observation.
hopefully the next audit will have some update on that.
Hopefully we'll
Good.
make some progress
Yep.
on that.
Okay. The second item is just the town's fraud prevention process, typically first of all, the state laws allow the town accountant the ability to look at any department. It's the only employee, town position that can go into any department and say, I can look at your records, I can audit your records. Mass general law allows that. Someone from the building department cannot go into the assessors department and say, I want to look at your records, without doing freedom of information and all this other sort of stuff. So what some towns do is they build around a fraud process around the town accountant. Okay, the town accountant would go into, like, the town clerk's office, the building inspector's office, the veterans'
Veterans.
office, whatever.
Yep.
Just pick a list of departments, line them up, okay? We got 20 departments. And not tell the departments when they're coming. These are surprise type things. And go in and basically for that half a day or whatever it is, go in and do an audit. And what some towns that are doing it successfully do maybe one a quarter. I know it's disruptive to just have, without an internal audit function, which you don't have, it's gonna be very disruptive to be in and out of departments doing audits. But if you do one a quarter, okay, we're gonna do town clerk this quarter, next quarter we'll do building, the quarter after we'll do veterans, and so on and so forth. You make a list, and then you do your little findings and everything. What happens is the department heads now know, they know that there's somebody coming to actually look at the detail of the departments. Okay, so let's take, for example, town clerk. Okay, we have $2,000 worth of dog licenses that got turned over. If they're $10 each, I should have issued 200 tags. So let me see the numerical sequence of your tags. Did you go from $199 to $399? If you went from $199 to $499, I'm missing something. So that's the sort of thing that you would do when you go into these types of departments. Departments that have little cash turnovers, what you do is you look at when the last turnover was. You should know what's in that box by what their activity is. So how much do you have in the box? What's the activity? Does it tie out? So that's something, it's been in the management letter now, every audit that we've done. I know there's time constraints within the town, but this is something I highly encourage that you do, implement.
I would like to see us implement this.
It's important. I mean, you read,
I agree.
pick up the Worcester Telegram and Gazette any day, and you'll see something, something, somewhere. Okay, so now let's get into general findings. Lease accounting. So the town has looked at leases as an optional form of financing. You've gone through an analysis and determined that it's more attractive to possibly go through the lease side rather than the borrowing side, or appropriating from free cash direct. So there were some leases that were entered into in the current year. The important thing to note here, number one, there's a new SEC disclosure, and the town was not in violation, which is good. But there's a new SEC disclosure that went into effect on February 26th of 2019, that leases that you enter into after that date, if they're determined to be material, you have to do an SEC filing. Leases were always exempt. Now you have to do a filing. So if you determine that, say you go out and you lease an ambulance, I would say that's a pretty good-sized lease. Or a fire truck, that's a good-sized lease. A large piece of DPW equipment. Police vehicles, I wouldn't say those are large leases, so I wouldn't worry about those being subject to the SEC disclosure. But anytime you have something that's pretty big, you should be calling your financial advisor over at Unibank. Is it Unibank or Hilltop? Hilltop. Hilltop. Call your financial advisors at Hilltop, have a conversation with them and say, hey, do we need to do a disclosure? I think you have like 48 hours or something to that effect to do the disclosure.
Mr. Roselli, what is the purpose behind that? Is it just is it coming after like a lot of the Patriot Act stuff where they did a lot of SEC rule changes or otherwise? What's the purpose for
No,
doing
I think,
that
I think they're
filing?
just catching up with the private sector.
Hmm.
So if you're a public company and you have a material event, you have to file what's called an 8K within 48 hours or 72 hours, depending on what type of 8K event it is. So I think slowly but surely, the rules, the Wall Street rules are catching up to governments because you do issue bonds that are subject to Wall Street regulations. You're a public issuer of bonds. So, whereas in the past, back in 2000, when Enron and, all the, I can't remember all the names of the
Right.
companies, but there was a lot of fraud and a lot of craziness going on. A lot of rules changed. There was a lot of discussion back then about forcing the governments to do a lot of the things that the private companies are supposed to do. But they realized that there was money constraints and just qualifications, the type of people that are working in governments versus in the private sector. But slowly but surely, they're catching up. They're catching up, and they're forcing you to do these things. So this is just another step that if somebody's invested in your bonds, then they ought to know that you just did a good-sized lease. Like for a fire truck, that could be a $700,000 lease, a fire truck. Thankfully, in this situation, all of your leases predated February 26th, so you were not in violation. But the town accountant wasn't aware of these leases, or maybe was aware of them but didn't have the documentation that we needed for the audit. So I recommended that the accounting office become the central point for where the leases end up. And also the accounting office should be involved in the process. Should be looking, because the accounting officer is your financial officer, so they should be involved in that process when the lease is being entered into. I'm not sure if that's, is this unusual, or will there be leases going forward, you think?
There will be leases going forward until such time as we can hopefully work our way out of it by setting aside monies annually
Right.
into a stabilization fund, withdrawing the cash and then replenishing it.
We just don't
That
have the
would be,
capital to do that.
that would be my
Right.
ideal if we could get to that.
And leases are a pretty cheap way of accomplishing your goal, so it's not,
More expensive, but,
it's not a terrible strategy.
right.
But again, if you're doing it, you gotta follow some rules. So interest income, there was some, we found that there was some, you went out to borrow money, and you didn't spend it right away. So there was a pile of cash. There was the police station, and what was the other one, Carter?
The elementary school?
The elementary school. So the elementary school and the police station, the money hadn't been spent down, so it was earning interest. That money, per Department of Revenue rules, is to go to the general fund. It was posted to those projects. So we pointed it out to the town. The town has made an entry to remove those monies from the capital projects funds. So in the future, all that interest income should be going to the general fund.
Okay.
Okay, last year, this is an update, actually, this is resolved. I like resolved, when I put resolved next to it, it's nice. So we had put a comment on maximizing investment returns. Last year, we noticed that because of the activity of the open market, Federal Open Market Committee, that interest rates had begun to rise, and they had trickled all the way down to the banks. The banks had gone from 0.1% to over 2%. And the town was sitting on quite a bit of money, because you'd brought in some capital project money, and you just started to accumulate reserves. So at the time, we had mentioned to take a look at that. You had not moved the money. The money was still earning 0.1%. In fact, you earned less than $10,000 on about $8 million. So the town had, and this was late in the year, so you didn't see the full impact in 19, but it went from 10,000 to 50,000 in earnings. So you had a nice earnings there. Plus, when you move the capital projects money over, it's even more. In fiscal 20, I think you'll see an even bigger chunk of investment income coming in. But it's important. What happened is a lot of treasurers, because they got used to seeing 0.1% for 10 years, this happened back in 2009,
Understand.
you kind of don't stay on top of it. It's not just here, it was everywhere. This comment was in every single management letter. And I'm like, guys, we're up to 2%. Why do you have 10 million in this 0.1?
Yeah.
10 million times 2% is a good number.
Right.
So so a lot of them have begun moving in that direction, and we'll start to see some of that interest income coming in a little higher in 20. System security, we talked about. I refer to the network security here. Closing checklists are resolved. We're here today. Closed faster than ever. Got our free cash quickly. So the closing process, this was the most efficient one that has happened in Templeton. Last year it was better, but there was still some issues. It's gotten better now. What I had recommended is just put together a checklist of what you have to do when you close. Because what happens if you submit everything to the Department of Revenue and you forget things, every time you forget something, it delays 3 days. Oh, you forgot this, there's another 3 days and another 3 days. So it's good to just have a nice checklist and say, I have the statement of indebtedness, I have the cash rec, I have the balance sheet, just go right down and check off everything you have and then submit it to the Department of Revenue, and it'll go much quicker, and it did this year. It went very quick. Number 6 is sewer user charges. Those look like they're resolved. So what we had suggested is that the collector's office collect the user charges. And I guess that's gonna be happening, should be happening now,
The
right?
intent is that that'll happen with the end of this month.
Okay, so we'll look
Some
forward-
wrinkles in the software conversion, but
Yep,
the intent is it'll happen with this billing.
and it's good, you're segregating the billing and the collection function. You're putting the collection side in the collection office, that's what it's intended for. So I think it's gonna be efficient, and it's gonna be a better form of collection. Compensated absences, again, this was a challenge, and what compensated absences is on June 30th. So-and-so was supposed to get 4 weeks vacation, but they only took 2, so they're owed 2 weeks. So you take 2 weeks times their rate. That's a liability. You do that for every employee, and then you have a number, and you say, okay, that's the liability I have to report on the financial statements. And this has been a challenge for the town, just getting that information together, because you need the cooperation of the department heads, and then just pulling it all together. And then you need to make sure, this one says he's got 3 weeks left, but I remember he did this, and this, so you kind of
Check that.
you're kind of double checking that. So so I have not audited this, but Kelly has made me aware that for fiscal 20, the process is better, it's more streamlined, and I'd love to see the town get to the process where it's right on the check. Here it is. Anytime you take vacation, it subtracts it, and it's on the paycheck. You got 18 hours left, and it's right there. I'd love to see the town get to that process, and it seems like it's
bananas.
trending that way.
Wow, okay.
All right, indirect costs. Again, I'd like to see an agreement with water, sewer, and light. I'd like to see, instead of just saying it's about this and use that same number every year, I'd love to see an agreement. Everyone sit down and say, okay, what percentage of the accounting office are we using? What percentage of the treasurer's office are we using? What percentage of IT are we using? And just go through it and come up with a nice spreadsheet that says, okay, these are the costs for water, sewer, and light that are being incurred by the town side.
Right.
And then have everyone sign off on that, and that's the agreement. Just, that's what I'd love to see.
We talked through that on our last,
We did, I will say that we had sort of made an internal decision that we wanted to get the sewer collection transferred up, running get agreement, sign off as to how much they were gonna pay for that.
Yep.
And then we would move on to the other.
Yeah,
um,
we're
just-
aware, we've just
Just
talked
because
about
it was
it
kind
last
of
week.
overwhelming to the sewer department to try to talk about both issues at the same time, but
It's because it's holes when we have our, it's not our expenditure station. What did we approve last month? It's holes, it's unknowns that we have, and, you know, that's a good recommendation for us to get into a better situation where we can have a clear picture rather than, we have to wait.
I mean, one of the things, and Winchendon does this, they had all kinds of problems, they've kind of resolved their problems. They created an audit committee, and on the audit committee meets 4 times a year, and they go through the management letter and have all the departments come in, and then they keep doing it till the things are fixed. So they'll go through and say, okay, where's this update stand? Where does this update stand? And I'm maybe not suggesting you have an audit committee, but maybe have a process where everyone that this affects sits in a room and says, okay, what have we done? Because we are now, we're 5 months into 2020. Okay, budget season's coming up, you're getting through your recap, and I just want to make sure that these things do get
That's what he's talking
addressed, and not sit around. And something like this indirect cost, which seems like it might be a hurdle, might be able to get pushed across if we're having these types of meetings. So, just my 2 cents.
That's a good one.
Board of Selectmen goals.
You know, maybe after we've had this meeting, to hear me, you have whoever this impacts, maybe come in and sit down, you know, come January or something.
Our last business meeting, we talked about this. It was the questions as we released our draft revenue estimates, just to kind of talk through those issues and how we interact with them. So again,
Yeah.
very, very well, point very well made and taken.
So capital assets was in a manual system, then it was being tracked through Excel. So right now it's in software. So it's in fixed asset software. There's an inventory. The next step is just to go through the inventory and see if there's anything really old. And we didn't want to make that a project for this year, but a project for next year's audit is to just go through, because I don't think it's been really updated, other than the additions, but no one's really gone through and said, does this police car still exist? Does this piece of public works equipment still exist? So sending the asset inventory to each department head and just cleaning it up would be my next recommendation.
Okay.
But this is pretty much resolved, this issue, this reporting issue. Ambulance write-off policy, so the old ones are accumulating, and they're getting large. From what I understand, was there a new fire chief, or?
Yes.
Recently.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is something that I think you were gonna sit
yeah,
down.
and we have one in the financial management policies that we've got to get the chief's attention turned to the due dates that are in the financial management
So
policy.
do we have a strong chief here, or a soft chief?
Um,
The way it's set up, is it strong fire chief?
we have the, we have the.
Weak chief
We
is
have
what
the
it is.
strong chief form of.
Strong chief, so
Strong chief.
so the strong chief calls the shots here. In a weak chief form of government, you guys set the policy, you guys do the write-offs. In the strong chief form, they do that, so they're gonna need a little bit of nudging probably to,
And I think that's hurt us in the past, having that. I would never heard of it referred to like that before, but I think that's been a problem for us in the past, having a strong chief set up.
I think this chief would come to us. I
Yeah.
don't think it
Yeah,
would
I'm
be
not
like
talking
the
about
other
the current
chief.
chief, right?
Yeah, the other chief didn't
Correct.
come to us,
That's correct.
And Andy misread the statute and,
totally.
totally misconstrued the
Mm-hmm,
depth of his authority.
mm-hmm.
But I think the big thing is to just take the section out of the financial management policy, put it in front of the chief and say, let's have a conversation about how we can clear this audit finding off the decks for FY '20.
All right, so, finally, in the treasurer collector's office, so March 23rd of 17, there was 17 findings in that letter. We're down to 1, 2, 3. So, number one, just collecting cash from department heads weekly. Let's create a policy that talks about how and when we collect money and how it's to be maintained before it's collected. You know, we don't keep it in loose drawers, we don't take it home. You know, how do we do that? I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but what is the
Oh,
process?
you scared me.
But it is now on social media.
Yeah.
So shortly after the posting of this
It's
meeting will be.
not in drawers.
Thank you.
But you collect checks, whatever, on Monday. If you turn it in on Friday, what's the policy?
Thank you.
There are safes there are nice safes in the building that, you know, you could go to during the end of the day or however you wish. But there should be a policy. And you definitely don't want department heads holding on to checks, cash, whatever, for more than 2 or 3 weeks. I usually say 1 week, or if you collect a lot at once for some unusual one-time thing, turn it over right away. So, need a policy on that. We had recommended a lockbox, and I guess you went through some sort of analysis and decided that it wasn't cost-effective. Okay, so we'll remove that. If it doesn't work for Templeton, we will remove that. And then cash forecasts. Treasurer should be preparing a cash forecast. You know, here's my starting cash, here's my big pension check, here's my weekly payroll, just a cash forecast. Here's when the real estate money's coming in, here's when the motor vehicle's coming in, just to know where you're at different points. And that helps you invest too. When you know you have a lot of cash on hand and you don't need it for a few months, you can dump it off into a 60-day CD. I mean, there's different things you can do when you're doing some cash forecasting. More importantly, it just lets you know where your cash is at any point during the year.
Thank you, Tony.
So what we've said to selectmen in advisory committees in the past is, the management letter, you've got the full report. If you could kindly let us know within 2 weeks if you have any questions. We'll regroup with Tony in case there's an answer or something we need to do, and then we can get this posted on the website for the general public.
Okay. If I could get these documents electronically so I
Yep,
can
we can do
send them
that.
out to our members that aren't here, please.
Sure.
You can do that.
Are there any questions?
Just
Yeah, please.
a couple clarifications. I remember at the initial audit you did it in 2017, and I don't have the book with me, you cited a general law that all leases of the town are supposed to be in the control of the accountant's office, in a book, I think you said. So, and you just made a recommendation that leases for capital, you know, should be with the accountant. Now, when the Mass General Law says leases, does that include those types of leases, or is it just like if you're leasing a building to another community? Or
Oh, sure, yeah, any type of lease, operating and capital.
So, that's not really a recommendation, that's a law.
That's a mandate, yeah, that's a mandate. In fact, anything to deal with procurement, contracts, anything like that has to end up in the accountant's office. If it's a construction contract, it needs the accountant's signature on it as a, you know, funds are available. So it needs, it can't be a contract till the accountant's signature is on it.
And
so.
the other thing I'd just like to clarify, because people watch at home, and they heard you, you stated, we have unassigned fund balance of 2.6 million, and I don't want people to say, well, I hear you talk about the stabilization fund only has 600,000 in it. Where's this other $2 million? That you included what is a so-called free cash certification for this year. Is that?
Yeah, it's not quite the free cash number because the state does a
Right. They have to
bunch of
clarify.
amendments to the number, but it's the undesignated balance in your general fund.
Okay, because I saw on the recap sheet, it was 1.7 something 1.7 something million dollars.
Yeah.
And the first thing that was deducted off of that was, real estate receivables was like 225,000. So yes, maybe we had 1.8 million in free cash, but the DOR, the state, they take their
They
piece
take away,
before
right.
they give you yours. So on paper, it was 2.8, but the town doesn't actually have their hands on that
No.
because of, and that's just, I just wanted to clarify that
Yep.
because people will say 2.8, they're telling, they don't have money, but on paper, there was 2.8, but in reality, it gets whittled down.
Yeah, that's a number that the bond people use, the unassigned fund balance. When you go to the state, it's a completely different,
And I
completely
just
different thing.
want
Yeah,
that to
Kelly's
be
been,
clear.
been right in front of us. I think it was even like 2 meetings ago where she went through the entire process. So everyone had a
So,
pretty
but I
good
Do all the
idea.
deducts and everything, and you don't end up with that.
Right, I just
Right.
want that to be clear because.
How much is in stabilization?
Operations are about 710 now, I think. Capital's about $1.25, and I think the OPEB's $1.50 somewhere.
So you got
in there.
close to $1 million
So we're
in
getting close to $1
stabilizations.
million.
In stabilizations, you have about $1 million.
All three of them.
And then
yeah,
that gets you down to the 1.7
whatever.
that you're talking about, and then the state takes their,
That's what their thing,
you know,
so,
their
yeah,
piece.
I just, but I just wanted that to be,
Mhm.
to be clear, because I don't want people to think, well, you're only saying you got this much, where's this other money, you know, it just wanted it to be clear,
Yep.
okay, thank you, Tony.
Yes.
Dan?
I guess I would just like to make sure, and I'm not sure why we didn't think about it this year, that this is included in your goals next year.
I saw
That you make
that.
sure
Yeah, there were a
that
few.
you,
Terry,
said that.
Terry was
you
kind
make
of
sure that
whispering.
you know, this needs to be included in some of our meetings as well, in our upcoming meetings.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We have to ask
Live and learn.
questions of this piece, and in the management letter, but this needs to
This
be,
is a blueprint.
goal-oriented. This is a blueprint
you
for
guys
everything.
on what
And it's
to
to
do.
our advantage, thank
Yeah,
you.
there's
And
some
I would just
important
like to
things in
say,
here.
I agree,
kudos
and it'll
to
bring
our
more
financial team
revenue. It'll
for
bring-
really resolving, and the board,
Yeah.
for really supporting, our employees and our financial team, and for all that they've accomplished, because there was the 17 things, in the treasurer's department, had nothing to do with, Cheryl. Nothing, I would like to make that clear.
Oh, right,
It had nothing to
exactly.
do with
Sorry,
Cheryl.
sorry, I should've
Cheryl
known
had
that.
just, was coming on board and
Yes.
helped to resolve, a lot of these issues. And again, I was on the board with the 17 issues and a lot of things that have now been, resolved.
Right.
And, that management letter was very hard to swallow. So kudos to all of you for all the work that you have done in resolving a lot of this. And network security is very important in that executive session. It needed to be done in executive session, and we should really consider for the newer board having an executive session for you all to have an overview. So you should think about when that might be appropriate, Mike. Thank you, Tony, for coming and.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I look at, there are indicators, so I don't necessarily think there's like finger pointing.
No.
Can it be construed that way? I guess. But I look at these, I come from a military background. We had something called an annual statement of assurance. It's like, are you following your policies, and what are the indicators if they're not? So, not having sat through one of the briefs before, maybe I watched it on YouTube or otherwise, I certainly, and I'm really glad that we have the advisory committee with us tonight. I think it's really good to be able to go through these and look at them, categorized the way that you did with the material weaknesses, the control findings, because that allows us, as a board, to understand and then work with our team to prioritize these. What are the big rocks that we
Yes.
need to attack first? That 17, that was a large amount.
Yes, and
you were
look how
able to
much they've
prioritize.
accomplished.
Yeah. So
Carter helps them with that.
I know that we receive the report and discuss it, and take notes and otherwise, and like Diane said, it needs to be one of those considering documents when we have we call it the retreat. We basically set our goals and otherwise, to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. Any kind of like public comment where people are looking for us to again, you use the word prioritize and take a look at the things that we really need to be working on in the community.
Right.
And you're right, you said it on your cover sheet in the onset, we are doing better. And I think that's the message that we're trying to bring. It happens, it's difficult to run communities. And we continually go through these trials and tribulations of doing such. But thank you for coming and presenting tonight.
Thank you.
Great.
You guys are at the conference in January?
Yes.
Stop by the desk.
Absolutely, we will.
All
Great.
right.
Merry Christmas.
Have a safe
Merry
drive.
Christmas.
Yeah, all yous too. Thanks.
Safe travels.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, ladies.
Help
Thank
it's to the
you.
right.
I was just gonna say that, hope to help you then.
Everyone good? Can we go back to our discussion? All right, for those folks at home, we're gonna go back into our joint discussion with the advisory committee on their proposal to put together a committee. As Jeff had stated, we're now kind of talking through what are our policies and how we can do this. I think the things that you read out of our policy were kind of the same that I read: purpose, scope, duration, makeup, and otherwise. So I think that's where we were, and we were having a discussion about, I think we were looking at makeup right now. We're starting to have the discussion of who should sit on it. Actually, I think we finished up talking about, this would then probably come up with some recommendations that we could use as the impetus to put this in front of town meeting, should we so decide. But let's talk about the makeup. How many? 3? 5? 7?
Well, I think if you, oh, I'm sorry. I think if you're going to have at-large members and definitely advisory committee members, and so if you were to have 2 and then maybe 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, that would be 5. So you
Correct.
have an odd number. I mean, I think.
Yep, and so to categorize them, because
That's my
I like the fact that Jeff brought it up, to follow within our with our policy and procedures, absolutely, 100%. The 2 at large would be considered residents, because you mentioned something about like lawyers and
Well, yeah.
scholars and
Whatever we're
otherwise.
gonna, whatever the purpose of the committee is,
Yeah, but we didn't, so we had the purpose.
Mhm.
I was gonna ask what the scope
so.
was, but we're talking about the makeup.
Yeah, let's get that small one out, I think, getting that done. So 2 at large, does everyone agree?
2 at large?
2 at large?
What do you think, Bobby? You're kind of shaking your head.
Yeah, I agree with the odd number, and I was just wondering if 5 or 7 would be better, if it's, I
Who
mean,
would
I know
be
it's
the
gonna be
other two?
hard to get,
We could
that's
we,
what I was saying,
could
but
we,
I mean, even if, we had, 2 members of the board, or 2 members of this board, and, I'm not doing math here, Diane, so.
Well, no,
please
I'm just
don't
doing it
add
in
me
my
up.
hand.
could we
So,
say
I mean, you
5
kind
to
of got to have
7?
an odd number.
Yeah.
Could we say 5 to 7? I mean, we'll be lucky if we get 5, but if we got 7, then.
Well, we're writing the
You got to have a
charter for it.
distinctual, you
You
got
have
to
to
have
be
a distinctual number, yeah, to make a charge. And then to, like,
So
here's
you
your
couldn't
committee, here's
say-
your charge, here's your scope.
Yeah. So you just.
I mean, we have to give the charge,
5 up to 7.
because then if you end up with 6, that's
Yeah.
not right.
5 or 7?
I think you
mean-
just gotta pick a number.
Carl?
It
So
has to
two-
be one
Hang on
number.
one sec, so 2, I think we're kind of getting there with 2 at large, 2 advisory committee. Just talking forward, 2 Board of Selectmen, or 1. Well, we haven't brought up the school committee at all,
Nope.
nope.
I thought we talked at our meeting, they didn't want this school committee because they we wanna,
They're
they
biased.
wanted to come up with it independently.
All right.
Their own numbers and their
Okay.
own,
What
Alright.
about one at large and two and two? One at large, two advisory, two selectmen? Do you guys have any preferences? If she's saying five,
I'm fine with 5 myself. I just, think more's better always, but if we can get them, that's the thing.
three, that's
who
the
would,
thing.
who would be your other two people, Bob? Like,
Three at large,
do you
yeah.
have some, I like seven.
I really don't.
I like seven.
Yeah,
I think more is better too,
yeah,
So you have more great minds.
yeah. I really don't. I'm just, kind of wondering, either I think on the, let's say, the at-large side, we're either gonna have more people that wanna do it, because it's related to the school and they wanna have a say, they wanna have some input,
yeah,
or we're gonna have nobody.
right.
So we're either gonna end up with 4 or as many as we want, So I don't know.
I like 2, 2, and 2.
And then you need seven, so you want two, 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 so how about three at large?
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
So 3, 2, and 2? So we need
Okay.
3 at large, 2 AC and 2 BOS?
But then I think then if that's the case, like Bob said, what if you don't get enough? How do you?
I think it would behoove us to go out there and say, we're creating an ad hoc committee, and would you want to join? I can already think of 3 people I would ask.
Depends on when you
Okay.
meet.
I mean, that's who seem like interested in wanting
Okay.
to know more and do more. So that's just 3 from me,
No,
I would hope that we would have people to ask.
there was a lot of discussion and a lot of
Yeah,
input
there've been a
around
lot.
this issue, so I'm sure there'll be people on both sides that might wanna participate.
Right,
I'd hate to have it limited to one
right,
person,
one person,
I agree.
right.
you
I
know?
agree too.
But I also, I'm a little leery of setting it at 7, requiring the 3, and then us not getting that, so
I
then
think you
what
would get
happens
it.
with the committee?
I think you would get it. I think a lot of
That's
people
what I
were
was thinking.
interested in what happened this year with the budget, and,
Will the quorum rules apply?
yes,
All right, well, you get 4 for the meeting.
right, and you'd need 4 people.
Once you have the committee, it's just a numbers.
I mean, we didn't have a
It's numbers at
problem with that
point.
with the elementary school building committee. We always seemed to have a
Yeah.
quorum, and we had
True.
7 people, so we didn't have a problem with that, and people were very interested in that committee.
I just
Till
think you
the
get
end.
more opinions,
All right,
And that was citizens at large.
3, 2, and 2. Let's move with that.
Okay.
Frequency. Oh, I'm sorry, Carter, you
Well,
did.
May I just, one of the reasons that the policy speaks to banker, lawyer, baker, candlestick maker is to think about who the stakeholders are. And it's not necessarily just 3 citizens at large. But you want to have, for instance, when we did a regionalization study with a vocational, we wanted to have the parent of a vocational student. We wanted to have
All
an
right, to define
educator.
them.
We wanted to have an educator. When you speak to citizen large, that just basically means any citizen that's interested. But you may have educators who are interested.
Right,
You may have parents of students
right.
who are interested. There may be some particular subsets of the population that you want to try to get involved. It makes it a little bit more difficult as opposed to just, well, you get 3 people to please raise their hands, but it gives you a perspective you're not necessarily going to get without having those subsets there.
We
So
definitely need
I
a
would,
parent.
What about people you want to avoid?
Well,
I don't think we should be saying
My
that.
suggestion to you is that you think in terms of the subsets of people you want to have present, keep the names out of it for the moment,
I didn't say
and then when you
names.
go to fill the slots, make those decisions amongst yourselves.
Like elderly, an elderly person. You could have an elderly person.
If if you feel that they are a subset that of some concern, yet you can have an elderly person. I'm not
I
quite
think-
sure what that is anymore.
Trying to think
I think
outside the
basically-
box.
Or they can fill in, I'm sorry, Tony.
I think basically what you're trying to say is, you'd like people with vested interest.
Yeah.
Not necessarily vested, but with interest, yes.
Or experience.
I would say
Yes.
Who can
Yes,
give
I
you-
think
who can
that's,
give you insights.
that's a
Right.
good point.
experience.
How do you
Experience.
define that?
I don't,
Well,
Need a
like if you
parent.
have a resident who's also a teacher, like you said, an educator.
Professional,
Right.
fine.
An educator. You know, they.
A parent of a
maybe they
student in
work at Ash
school,
West, maybe they
something
work
like
here.
that.
I guess
Maybe
what
they
I'm,
work in Sutton.
what
Well,
I'm
no,
getting
my wife
at is
isn't willing to do this.
non-biased opinions.
Bob?
if I might, I'm getting a little confused here as to what we're doing, cause I might just be confused. But I thought we were looking at finances, not the school functionality. So the financing of the school budget, you know, I thought that's what, you know, financing is the directive of the advisory committee. If financing is this, so the educator aspect doesn't have anything to do with finance. They may or may not have something to do with finance, but just because they're an educator or a lawyer or a doctor doesn't mean anything to me. I want a taxpayer. That's basically the only criteria that I want, is I want a taxpayer, because they're the people paying the bill.
What about an accountant?
You know, if they're a taxpayer,
Somebody that
bring them on
works
down.
for, H&R Block or something.
That's just my personal opinion.
You
We
know,
need
somebody
tax
that knows,
payers.
you're saying you want somebody that
Yep.
knows numbers. I'm saying non-biased.
No,
and
no, no,
somebody
no.
that knows
No, he's
numbers.
just saying if you're a
He's saying don't
taxpayer in
limit
the
it.
town, don't limit it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily
We need
an accounting
taxpayers.
professional or something. Just someone who's a taxpayer that would be interested in looking at this.
So let's, in the write-up for it, because there's the solicitation, whether we're asking or otherwise, but what we're looking for, I mean, more to Bob's point, we'll take what we can get, especially if we're not gonna get anything. The three at-large should constitute, an educator or a school employee. Second one, parent of a student within the district, also a resident. And then a resident with financial expertise, or a taxpayer.
No,
I disagree.
He just said the
He just
exact
wants all
opposite of that.
taxpayers.
He just said the exact opposite of that.
Oh, he did, okay.
Yeah.
No,
because-
no qualifying.
Yeah. 'Cause
Don't
I mean,
qualify it at all.
Okay.
I
Finance
just
is not
might,
policy.
Not even that, just taxpayers who are interested in this,
Three at-large taxpayers of Templeton.
who are interested in their stake in their school.
Yep, and that language can go in there.
That
All right.
sound right?
Because if you narrow the scope down,
Then we
then
might
you
not get
basically
anybody.
narrowed the pool down.
you get the answer you're
Got it.
looking for.
Right.
Right, and that's not what
That's
we're
what I
looking
was
for.
trying to
Right.
say with
That's not what we're looking for.
non-biased, right. That's
Agreed.
what I was trying to say.
Let's move frequency.
Non-biased. Frequency?
I think, well, I can tell you on the
Bi-weekly?
elementary school building committee, we determined the frequency after we first met.
Okay.
We allowed the committee to determine that frequency and based on the scope and the things that needed to be done.
So if you think the goal is to get a potential warrant article for the Springtown annual town meeting, then, you let
I
the
don't know if I
committee
wanna
decide.
bake that in there.
Yeah, that wasn't our goal at the outset.
Carter, please.
Well, normally, Tony's on the right track here. Normally, you would pick when do you want to get the report? And that will often tie into, what am I trying to do? So if I'm trying to hit the annual town meeting of 21, let me just use that, you know that you are preparing a draft warrant in February, which you know is going through the budget process on January 1. So the charge to the committee then becomes, we want your report finished by December.
Okay.
If you're trying to hit the fall town meeting, if you're trying to hit the annual town meeting of 20, you just kind of, what is the goal here? Because if the goal is to analyze the finances in order to propose potential amendments to the district agreement, which need to be submitted to the town meeting, you just, what's the end goal and how do you back into that?
So then what I would do is, once the committee's formed, allow them to set their goal of when they think they can
Right,
get the
it's
data.
up
Would
to
that
them.
committee choose its own chair?
Yes,
Yeah.
they do all that stuff.
Okay. All right, perfect. The frequency is gonna be defined by a report due date.
Right,
Right, so when is the due date?
that's what I was gonna, what year?
If I might, I'm just throwing this out there, I don't know if you have anything more specific, but I would say something like October 1st of next year,
Of 2020?
of 2020, so that it gives the committee enough time to get established, to meet. Also, it's before, let's say, next year's budget start.
Right.
So there's, we have a deadline, we have some information, we have some way to go with something.
That sounds good.
And then it doesn't
I
just go
agree.
on forever, too.
Right, I agree. Right.
I thought our fiscal year started July 1st.
It does.
Well, I'm just thinking, we're
He's talking about
starting our
the
budget
process.
season now
Budget season
for
kickoff.
next year, so.
With a goal of 2022? No, 2021?
No,
2021?
21.
31st of September, 31st, 30th of September,
That's good.
30 September,
30 September.
okay?
I was
Now-
gonna say, yeah,
This time next
Good off
year.
Some of the, when we start, yes, Jeff, go ahead.
No, it's just sometime
the
like
30th of
within,
September.
Of
like
course
this
you do.
time, a year, so you're not rushed and you have time and it's before budget season, so
I think you
if
set
it's
that,
something
you
we
set that
could
as a
do,
goal.
or the board, whoever sits here
Sorry, you
could
can't
do,
make it, you can't
they
make
could
it.
do it, or, well, we meet another 6 months or whatever.
We're
Just,
not even gonna vote on this
that's a good point.
in January.
right, this is a workshop.
January? Well, then we would have already met for our goal retreat and, well, I wouldn't have, but you all would have.
Well, it's the work, I think it's the work of the committee that's gonna, I don't think it's gonna be defined by another external process.
Well, we can make it be defined by that.
Sure, again, you can bake in something
Well-
like that. I just think that the committee's trying.
Well, would we have,
The advisory
It's
committee, I think, has
information.
done the lion's share of the work to be able to say, here are the questions we're trying to ask.
We don't want you to steer the committee, you want the committee to steer themselves. You know
I
what
would
mean?
agree with that.
Okay. So a year?
so, just to Diane, are you saying, because they're gonna report back to us, and it would be nice to have it before we set our goals for the year, the report?
That's what I was
Is
thinking.
that what you're
Yes.
thinking?
That's what I was thinking.
I
Do,
think that's what you're thinking.
does the Board of Selectmen, this is what I'm questioning, so what I'm hearing Diane say is, this ad hoc committee is gonna be formed and come back to the Board of Selectmen with their
And
findings.
the advisory committee,
Right?
and the advisory
And the
committee.
advisory committee, so this ad hoc committee has two committees to present
Well, the
before.
Board of Selectmen is creating the charge,
Okay,
because we have to, because it's in our
okay,
policies.
you're saying, and I don't exactly
what I'm saying is,
understand
wouldn't
what
it be
creating the
nice
charge.
if you had something
Right in
before
the
you set,
document.
before you went into your retreat?
Yeah. And
That's just my opinion.
how do you feel about that? Because so we're setting the charge, what is our follow-up responsibilities to meet that charge? We're setting it, what's our follow-up responsibilities once that, the committee?
They come to you
Right.
with the information, and then you go into your
We
goal setting,
deliberate.
that whatever you decide.
I see them as dissimilar. I think
Okay.
I think what we do, Carter spent some time to make sure that we understand what does that work, what does the retreat do for our financial management policies? What the effects of this are going to be, something might get recommended so it appears on an annual town meeting.
Okay.
And the way that Faith used the word open, basically opened it. You're now performing open heart surgery on this sucker. And it's based on what the committee has come up with, recommendations, any kind of public comment or deliberation period, put it on the warrant. And then the effect would be, if the recommendations made sense and they were on the warrant, that people would adopt them into the district agreement.
So the whole thing is about the district agreement.
Well,
So I don't see it that way.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
I don't see it that way.
It sounds
It
like.
could be.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
It could be,
this is
but I
basic-
don't see it that way.
I might be, again, I might be wrong, it's the first time going through this process, but I was under the understanding that basically the ad hoc committee is a fact-finding.
Right.
Right,
Fact-
they're on a
Basically-
fact-finding mission.
Right, and they're just looking at the stuff to present to you, and you can do with it what
Ever
you
you want.
choose.
Right,
But they'll give you the information on this subject to the best of their ability that says X. And then what you do with it from there is, you know,
But that
kinda
doesn't-
totally up to you guys.
But that doesn't limit the committee from making a recommendation.
No.
No,
So,
but it's
just
a
wanna make sure.
recommendation
Yeah.
to the selectmen.
Right, they could make a recommendation, they might not make a recommendation.
Yes.
That's why I was thinking it would be part of your goals. Or part of, like, you'll have this discussion again.
Well, I think it becomes a function of time, you know, for the committee to actually come up with that, because you've got, you know, we're at the end of the year now. We've got another retreat coming, not that far. When's the retreat again?
So if you want to have received the report to a joint session of these two bodies in time for you to consider that as part of your goal setting, you need that report by early August. That means they come in, they give the presentation, you have a chance to review it, and to then take it up in your goal setting.
So
If
timing
you
is-
want to set it aside from goal setting, but still take it up during the budget process in time for the annual town meeting of 2021, an October to November timeline works.
I just don't see them being that linked. I understand what you're saying, Diane, but I think from what the committee is going to do, they're gonna look at these things, and I'm looking at the, 5 and 3 bullets about regional school district questions, municipal school district questions. I think when they come back and they've done this study, they're going to make observations and recommendations. If we choose to incorporate those into our goals as like a long-range plan, I just don't see how I'm
Okay.
going to take that report and turn it into our product that we normally come up with at that retreat. You know, if we're just talking about time frame, to give them a maximum amount of time, their public meetings, I don't think 30 September is a bad date.
We may be done before then, or they may be done. before.
Sure, I guess you could put the language in there to say that no later than. So if they finish the report earlier than that, again, to your, you know, when you corrected me earlier to say frequency, they're gonna come up with that.
When do you think you'll have this charge written?
I would
I don't
think
know, depends on how long we spend tonight.
Jeff's
Jeff, please.
if just a thought on it would be, think you maybe have this committee up and working, say, by February. Maybe. Okay, so even if you said March. July, ask that committee to come to a meeting, and where are you? Are you still flipping coins, or have you come up with a basic outline of, you know, this is the stuff we're considering, and then we're gonna further investigate it in
Right.
detail, and then make a judgment call then.
Yeah,
Let's see, do you think they'll be ready for like August so you could do your retreat? Or you can just plan, say, well, they've got some interesting things, so when you have your retreat and you set a goal, one of the goals could be continue this committee to end. And if you think, man, they're just like spinning their tires, they ain't come up with nothing new, well, the goal is go in a different direction.
I think we have the flexibility to do that, Jeff.
Instead of giving them, you know, just coming up with this hard deadline in August, so you can put it on your agenda or talking points for, goal-setting, you know, retreat thing.
We can amend it then.
Just
I
make
think
it
that we
real.
will
I just
have the
think-
flexibility.
but I
What
think
I'm
we're
worried
just
about is the
spending-
work.
Spend a lot of time on the timeline thing instead of let them get up and running, and 6 months afterward, and just throw on the table, what do you got so far? Maybe they got really substantial stuff to work on, but if they have, you know, nothing, well,
Well, even if they took each one of these bullets as a separate meeting, I mean, that's 8
yeah.
meetings right
It's
there.
gonna be, that's why I said, I
And
think
then the distillation that you
we're
talked
getting
about.
caught up in this hard deadline time where we should just,
Well, let's just
see
throw,
if we can get
let's
the
throw one
thing
out there.
up
If it
and
gets
running.
amended, it gets amended. Yes, Carter?
You need to be careful to, I have to respectfully suggest that you need to be careful to not underestimate the complexity of education financing law in this state and how regional school districts function. And there's a lot more complexity in here than I would suggest you're taking into consideration.
Then that's probably not enough time.
Or it's enough time for the committee to at least do the study, and then what we do with it afterwards. You know, we're not gonna just
So maybe
spit it out in the next
September
meeting to say,
30th.
hey,
I think if
hey,
you
town,
use the
guess what
30th
we
of
got for
September,
you.
and if the committee, based on what Carter said, realizes, you know what, we're still working hard at this, but we need more time, then they can.
And
Come
the
back.
Well,
charge
if I could put it in a little bit
allow
more
for that.
perspective.
Yeah,
So, the
Unfortunately,
idea
I can't
came,
find the one that I thought was posted to the website.
you know, in this October memo, you have your problem statement. You know, we're living through our problem statement. What the purpose of this committee would be to answer some of these questions, to say, what are the ideas that are out there? That committee could finish and say, yeah, we came up with, we're staying the course. It, based on what those recommendations and observations are going to be, that report then, we do something with. Whether we throw it to a lawyer to say, what if we did this? Yeah, you can't do that. Would we have enough time to do it? I think I'm more concerned, Tony, that I want to be able to make progress with it and get to some of the substantive questions that would come up, that you really have given to us. And I think that we're starting to talk through a pretty strong framework to make that happen. I'm not getting hung up on dates or otherwise, because you can amend it
Yeah.
or otherwise. It's basically saying, this is probably what it's going to take, you know. A moment ago, Jeff was talking about, well, there is a lot of complexity. Carter said there's complexity. That's fine, but let's at least get something out there so they can start to work on the meat of this thing. Yes, Terry?
Speaking of the complexity, do we have any, would the committee have any resources?
They have to figure that out.
So
Right.
we would,
That's up to the committee.
Figure out what they need.
okay.
If they
Yeah,
need, for
the
example, to get,
Conference room?
you know, but for example,
about
they could send
lawyer.
emails,
Yeah,
probably not lawyers, but they could send emails to, Anne Marie Geister if they need funding information for the schools, you know, if they need to know, okay, how much is 7 pencils, or whatever the case may be. What I mean is, they're the typical town resources that are available to that committee. They may have to go through it, through the Board of Selectmen or through the TA, to request certain information, but, I mean,
well, when Carter mentioned the complexity of it, I was thinking, are there any state resources we would be able to use?
I think
How
they would
we-
have to look into that.
And would, if there was I don't know if there's any funding necessary.
May I?
I don't
Mr.
think
Chairman?
funding,
Yep.
we really.
Carter, what you got?
We didn't use anybody on the Templeton Elementary, did we, funding? Maybe a few to print a few
You
things.
didn't, but, well,
We did a little
we
bit.
did
Yeah.
some title, we did some others.
Yeah, we did a
Um,
few things, but,
Always gonna get a couple more copies of this, but may we circulate an example that would, I think, be helpful? And she'll bring those others in
Yeah,
just a
that's fine.
moment, please. So this is a sample,
you see this.
it's an actual
That was on it.
that we've used, it is the model. The first section simply states the purpose, what's the point of the committee, that's kind of an overview. The second section speaks to the composition, how many people are you gonna have? Well, in this case, there were gonna be 7. Where were they gonna come from? 1 from each of and appointed by the following boards. If it's 2 from the select board, it's 2 from the advisory committee. In that case, we had planning board, we had community preservation committee, but you don't necessarily need that. Then we had some other folks. We wanted to get 3 from 4 groups, an area resident, someone who is an advocate of affordable housing, someone who maybe was familiar with economic development, citizen large. So now we have the general purpose, we have the composition. And then, working with the email from Tony, we have the very specific chart. Look at this. I mean, it was fairly detailed as to what we wanted them to do. Then we had time for completion. In this case, because they were being tasked with going from A to Z, from studying what might be able to do with the building, to issuing a full RFP, to getting the selectmen sign off on the RFP, to issuing it and to having those results back in, because we were trying to hit a town meeting warrant. Then we said what staff there is that would support them. In this case, that was Eric. And then, so it kind of lays it out. And if you wanted an interim report, you can simply say, we want a final report with an interim report by such and such a date. And if that interim report is, we're gonna need a couple more months, we're gonna miss this date, you can decide, give us what you got by that date, because we're trying to hit this town meeting, or, okay, we get it, we're not gonna hit it. Special resources, we've spoken to you about special counsel. We're working with one firm now as to whether or not they would entertain working with you all and coming in and presenting to you. That would have to come out of legal counsel's budget and be backfilled. But we do not have financial resources beyond whatever's in the budget at this point. We didn't ask for an appropriation. So, I mean, that is a model that if you think it through that way is actually relatively easy to put together once I know
That's
number
what
of
I'm-
peeps, who they're
that's what I
coming
think.
from, and when you want the report.
Really, I mean, the wordsmithing of the purpose, I think we can get through. Composition we discussed. We talked about time for completion, staff support, effective date. Or when we come up with a draft for this composition and charge. The only piece that I would think that we have left, if everyone likes how this is set up, is very simple. I like the bullets, you've got the two sets of bullets, the 5 and the 3, based on regional school district investigation and comparison, and municipal school district investigation and comparison. I think that could almost become a virtual copy-paste
Yeah.
over into this document.
Right, and once you write the charge, you'll send it to our committee and we'll review it as a committee. And if we have any recommended changes to ensure the scope of what our committee wanted from this, I don't see you changing anything, but if something seems a little off, we reserve the right to make any changes back to you. And
Okay.
our next meeting will be, if you can get it done, January 2nd.
Yeah, I was gonna say, try and have the goal to get it done within January.
I need 1 hour after I know when you want the report. This,
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a dozen of these
I
in
understand.
the can.
Yep.
I just need to
No,
know
that's fine.
when you want it.
It's just the timing because of the time of year. I mean, we have the all boards meeting tomorrow, and then,
We have we have a
Yeah.
business meeting on the 11th.
Christmas. It's not a holiday.
You don't meet anytime
What?
between the end of the year, right?
Yeah, we do.
Well, we have a meeting that's scheduled on 19th, but I believe it's gonna be canceled.
Okay. I mean, I
We'll meet
think
second.
if Carter's, leaning forward in the foxhole, as those guys in the Army say, we can have something for at least a draft by review of this board by the 11th.
Yeah, I can have it on the agenda once I know what you want for closing date.
Right.
Okay. So then if you do it for the 11th,
You'll have it at your first available.
which will be the 2nd,
And then you can adopt it in January, should you wish to adopt it.
right?
Carter, what did you say?
That work
Time?
for everybody?
Yep.
I mean, what I need to know to complete this is when do you want the report? I'm hearing in time for goal setting, which means
I'd like
early
to see it 30
August.
September.
I'm hearing in
Get it done
time
sooner.
for budget, which is late September, October. I'm hearing, we want an interim report, that's easy enough to slip in. But the end date is the date that I really need.
I thought you said no end date.
All right, I mean, Tony said 30 September. I'm okay with 30 September. What are other people's thoughts?
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that.
And you can amend this too, right?
You could, I mean, my understanding is that there's gonna be a draft on your agenda the 11th of December,
Yep.
which you would then refer to the advisory committee for comment. We would need that comment back by, basically 2 January, 7 January, in time to get that to you for a vote on 16 January.
So if you get it out to us on the 11th, I can send it via email, as long as everybody just sends it, their comments to me and me only, and we don't violate open meeting law. As far as any I'll compile the comments, we'll discuss it at our January 2nd meeting, and then
I'll have something for you to
have
do
it back to
next
them.
week.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Adam's gonna do this at 7:30.
Yeah, I
Any,
think that's fine, I mean.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all
We're
they,
good?
I think we're good.
Stick around and you're gonna take off.
Yeah, I don't know if they wanna stay for C and D or not. The
They're right.
material is in their packet,
They're coming next.
and we can get comments
Okay,
if they
Yep.
wish to do that.
all right. Moving on to item C, financial management policy, education escalators.
Good evening, Adam.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Chairman, members of the Advisory Committee. As you are well aware, we still have to come up with our 5-year projections. And right now, in practice, we've been using an increase of 2.5% every fiscal year when we're doing the schools in the budget, for example. But it's at odds with the provision within the financial management policy, which states under B, Roman numeral 5, the state's net school spending requirements will annually be met or exceeded. So we had the presentation with Mr. Hatch and the advisory, select board, school department. And the net school spending is defined as the Chapter 70 state aid plus the town's required local contribution. That school spending is not minimum local contribution, and is the latter that drives our expenses more than the former. So essentially, there's 5 ways we can resolve this difference between our current practice of 2.5% and the policy, increase it by net school spending. We could, 1, utilize the current policy. 2, continue to use 2.5%. 3, utilize the historical minimum local contribution increases. 4, utilize the historical total assessment increase. And 5, give them the same percentage of our new revenues as they are of our budget. So I'm here because I want to be able to do the forecast, the 5-year forecast, the most accurate way I can. And essentially, I need guidance from you because we have contradictory language in the financial management policy, but at the same time, in practice, we're using the 2.5%. That's why I'm here presenting to the select board.
Yep.
It's a challenge looking at our revenues and our expenses in a 5-year, and in order for me to accurately predict where we're gonna be in that forecast, I kinda need to have some guidance here.
Adam, tell me why, quote, the state's net school spending requirements will annually be met or exceeded does not incorporate any percentage that we see fit or can increase.
Well, right now, you have your minimum local contribution,
Right?
you have your transportation,
Yep.
and then you have your additional. So essentially, whenever let's say you utilize the historical minimum local contribution increases, you would be taking away from the additional. So let's say the
Because the
minimum,
transportation might go up.
well, I'm saying, let's say you have minimum local contribution of 1 million, transportation 1 million, and additional 1 million. Let's say the next fiscal year, if you were to budget or predict it, the next fiscal year would be minimum local contribution 1,100,000, transportation 1 million, and then additional would be 975,000. It would be taken away, then the next fiscal year, your additional will be 950,000, and then
Yeah, we
925,000.
can't do that.
And 900,000.
Well, you can do it up to the point where there's no additional appropriation made, and at that point, you have to do a complete reset.
It'd be the reset. Just look at it, you have to reset. You look at the numbers, because you can see the exhibit that we attached. Carter actually put this together. The budget changes for fiscal year, should say 2015. That's a typo at the top, 2015 to 2020.
It should say 2015, not 2013, right?
Yes, that was a typo.
Yeah, too many cut and paste and columns hidden when they weren't needed without changing the header. Sorry about that. We don't need an answer on this tonight.
Yeah, we just wanted to bring it to your
resolve in
attention.
January, but we wanted to get it in front of you, because we do owe the board the 5-year revenue and expense projections. But there is a need to revisit what we're gonna use for the escalator to
Yep.
education expenses, to do that 5-year. I think that when the, policy was written and it referred to net school spending, which, as Roger walked you through, has got lots of different elements
Yep.
in it, plus is rarely known in time for the cycle that we want to use. It perhaps should have said minimum local contribution, it didn't, so we've used 2.5% in doing the budgets. So there's a couple different ways to go here.
I see what you're saying.
And we need you to be thinking about, and we'll try to get you some better financial estimates. But on the spreadsheet, you can see that if you had used, by way of, how much do we want to give you above the prior year assessment? In 2015, it was 3%. And yet, the minimum local contribution went up 3.56%. That also is a number that's not necessarily known till later in the year. So you end up using trends. So the policy would need to, if you're gonna leave it net school spending, or if you're gonna use minimum local contribution, it really needs to refer to a 5-year trend rate, because you're not gonna have the hard number at the time you have to do the projection. So the other thing to keep in mind is, if you say we're gonna give the schools 2.5% increase, the way you end up doing it is you do have to make an adjustment for the census shift. It's kinda hard to say to the school district, well, you give you 2.5% if you went from having 82% of the students to 85% of the students. That number we do know in October, roughly. It's not certified till December, but on October 5, October 10, I can call up and say, what's the number looking like?
Okay.
So there's a couple different things. We wanted to get this in front of you, get questions, because this is messy, so that we can be better prepared in January to have the discussion and try to get to a number.
And the minimum local contribution, in order for the schools to get their state money, needs to be met. So that's the minimum amount to give to the schools, so they could get their state money.
And one of the nuances of that is and one of the big things with that education reform thing was the minimum local contribution, they used that EQV number, the equalized valuation,
Yeah.
because they tried to put everybody on the same footing.
Right.
But that number, if you look at it, is bigger than the total assessed value of property in town, which is the amount of money that we take in. The EQV is larger, the minimum contribution is based off a number that you don't collect. So you're always, that's why all regional school districts, it's not just
That's
Templeton,
struggling.
not Narragansett,
Yeah.
they're always fighting for the money because your minimum contribution goes up, and a lot of times it exceeds the amount of money that you're taking in.
Right, but also remember that Mr. Hatch said that we do not have a lot of ELL, and we do not have, a lot of something else.
It's,
So we're always gonna be in a position where we are going to give more.
Well,
The ELL,
the English
and
language learners.
right, we don't have a lot of
And a
that.
lot of minority poor economic
Right, that we don't have a lot of that
disadvantaged
either.
things. So the funding goes to those communities, and our
Right, and not
funding,
us.
our minimum, our chapter 70 money does not increase like these other
Right,
communities. So,
right.
again, our minimum contribution, we pay that, we have to. But the
Right.
school district's costs go up. The chapter 70 doesn't keep
Right,
up with
it
it
doesn't.
because the
It was
English
written in
language learners and the
1994.
minorities, the funding is going there. This year's budget, or this reform thing that they did, we may see reimbursement in the special ed transportation and the circuit breaker, because if you look, the special ed transportation they haven't been really reimbursement, and that's not covered under the mandatory, but so many districts, I mean, a kid shows up at school, and the school district, they're not prepared to deal with them, and it happens. And they may spend like 80 grand on one kid, but they have to do it, and he gets sent, and that's what the circuit breaker money is supposed to help with that.
Right.
And then you have the transportation to take that, it could be one child, it's gotta go to this place, wherever, whatever it could be, for a specialist, for somebody who's trained, and wants to work with those children. And it takes a couple of them, and the school budget's like whacked. It's gotta come from somewhere. So the minimum local contribution, you gotta keep that in mind, how it's arrived at versus where we get the money to pay
Right.
that bill. And it's
Right.
always button heads until they
And
change that and fix it,
But-
and it
And
hasn't
as you,
happened.
as you've pointed out before too, let's say if they received their 100% transportation dollars, we wouldn't have even went down this road in
No,
fiscal year 20.
It would be a
Right.
lot
Yep.
less of a battle.
Yeah.
Diane?
But he also said that the Student Opportunity Act, they're changing some of that, so our required minimum contribution could go up.
It could.
So he did talk about that as well. And there's no way that we are not going to go down the same road again this coming year that we went down last year. It's not even possible. If it went up 9% this year, there's no way that they're not gonna go up again. So, and every year, by a gentleman's handshake, and I even said this to the school, that we've always given them the additional appropriation just by handshake. It hasn't come to the town, it's gone directly to the school, and they assume that they're gonna get it every single year. So they just automatically take it.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to recognize too, like as you pointed out,
And
that
they
we're,
need it.
that we're dependent on on state money.
Right.
Yeah.
We are.
We are.
And our taxes but the 2.5% immediately goes to the school, it doesn't come to us. And any override that we get goes to us for 1 year, and then it goes to the school. So, when Mr. Q got up at town meeting and said that needs to go directly to the ambulance, that's what we voted it for, but that's not how it works. It doesn't work that
It's
way.
for the
because
first year.
It's only for the first year
first
because
year.
the school needs so much more money. So it didn't work that way. It's most unfortunate. So at this point, I mean,
I just wanted to give you an idea of.
everything that Jeff said is true.
That's true, but what we're,
You have to
they
really,
put this, Carter and Adam has said, they wanna put this in front of us.
Right.
The
How to
current
decide.
financial management policy language does not really help us.
Right.
I wrote in my side notes, we've got to tweak this for the projection figures that we need. to
Correct.
build a sustainable growth pattern. So I'd like to go back to that to say, you know, let's look at the language that they've got here. Make sure that we understand it. Right away, and Carter, I'll get to you in a sec, just one sec. That last item, give them the same percent of our new revenues as they are of our budget. In my mind, that's, you know, we're maxing out what we possibly can give them. I'm referring to the spreadsheet now. It says dollar figure above prior FY. FY 15, you had $150,000. FY 20, it says 350. That was our new growth, correct? So that last bullet item there, given the same percentages of our new revenues, is basically dumping any new revenue into the school by a financial management policy. That's significant for this discussion because we're talking about a swing.
Well,
Yes, go ahead, please,
except for
Carter.
the way this would work, okay, so this is an approach. You say, we're gonna have $400,000 in new revenue this
Right.
coming year. Let me just use that
Yep,
as a number.
please.
And last year, our budget was $16 million. For simple math, let me keep it at $15 million. And we're $6 million of that. You were 40% of our budget. We're gonna give you 40% of our new growth. We'll give you 160. It's an approach. I'm not.
I'm following you.
You need to settle on what is the right policy for you.
I'm
But that's
there with you.
that's the simple math. And every year you sit down and you look at, our budget this year, 16 million, and you were X, and our new growth is Y, and that percentage of Y is this number.
Right.
And so,
But the reason why I bring up that
Mr.
last
Mr.
one as a
Prognosticator-
bookend,
Yes,
it's a bookend to say, we know what our growth figures are going to be, and we
Right.
also know what our school growth is. So from a policy perspective, that's something to consider, to say, I want to move
Yeah.
new growth into the growth of our school district.
I,
could.
I,
As a bookend, because
could,
the other
yeah.
side of it is, we want to keep it at 2.5% because we think that is going to keep in lockstep with, what was the one that you were just talking about?
The
The equalized value,
equalized
right,
value.
right.
But it doesn't.
Given
but the
those
challenge
five-year
too
forward
is-
projections, I do worry a little bit about using the word we know what it's gonna be. We can certainly project it based on some
Project.
historic trends and what we think the economy in general is gonna do.
Yeah.
You know, in general, there's a economic reset. This has been the longest
Yeah.
post-war one ever. But in general, there's an economic reset every, 6 years or so.
And as you know too, I mean, if we continue to use the 2.5% with like this last budget that we did together, the Monty Tech number was down because there was less students enrolled. So when we're doing these projections, it's difficult to be able, that's why we would have to adjust it for the 2.5% factor. Because I can't say, oh yeah, for this year, we're gonna have 10 more students.
You don't know.
You don't know.
that, right.
Exactly. And that's the method we've been using, but it's not gonna give an accurate
It's not.
forecast.
It doesn't.
Well, as you know, Mike, every projection is only as good as the assumptions upon which it's built.
Right.
So if the assumptions are set forth clearly and everyone feels that given the knowledge base we have, they are not unreasonable assumptions, then you have a document. If you've seen your Monty Tech climb, and you say, we're gonna assume that enrollment's gonna start declining, someone on these two bodies has to say, well, wait a minute, where did you get that idea from? So unless you have a population study or something else to back it up, we have to back off that.
That's what I was.
Well, I certainly don't want to stay the course and give you meaningless projection data. I'm not sure if 2.5% is a good rule of thumb.
Has it been
I like the
working?
idea, I like the language of utilize the historical minimum local contribution increases. You know, Carter uses your language that you just said, this will lock in place an assumption. Gives you, gives you direction.
Well, that will continue to give them the additional appropriation.
Yeah, I think that's another, good
That's
aspect.
the one I like.
Yeah,
Because we've always given it to them, and, I mean, they're gonna take it anyway.
Well, we did.
but I
we
mean,
did,
for this,
adjust it
yeah,
this year.
yeah.
On that last column, we need to get out a revised one, because the 20 that's shown is the one that was projected before the district meeting. And the one that was down lower, we should have swapped out. So we'll get you a couple more spreadsheets for illustration to show these, and would ask you to think about them between now and January, so that we can hopefully come to a consensus in January.
I mean,
Does anyone else
Carter-
have any input for, you know, like what they like, what they don't like? Do you see language that you,
Or if there's another option that
Right.
somebody's thought of.
okay,
I mean, we were going through the financial management policy, because Selectman Bennett brought up some points that we had to update within the policy itself. And we came across this, for example, and we're not doing it right now, so we noticed I know Selectwoman Diane Haley Brooks wrote the policy and is big on making sure that we follow that to the T, so we wanted to bring this to your attention, and if you could just ponder it and get back to us.
I didn't write the whole thing, please.
I thought you said you wrote it.
I was on the board that helped write.
It was the
6 cups of
procedures.
coffee and a pizza.
You led me to believe you wrote the whole thing.
No, I had a lot of
I was
issues with
impressed.
it. I had a lot of issues
So
with
it's the language that meter
it.
exceed is what,
Well,
meter exceed?
well, yeah, that's
That's too broad.
like, so Diane and I like that, the inclusion of
I
that
like that.
language.
Right.
Because it was the first
Locked.
question I gave to Adam to say, well, I'm already meeting it and I'm exceeding it.
Yep.
You know, it's dependent
Yeah,
on things,
it's-
but we're trying to do is making it a
more
meaningful,
concrete.
to do something for us within our financial management. And I think the third tick mark there, utilize the historical minimum local contribution
Right.
increases, that's in the right direction for me, anyway.
Me too.
It's a big decision.
It is a big decision, and
How does it impact residents?
Fortunately, I don't have to make that one tonight.
how does it impact our residents? Well, it's historical data. So, and if they're gonna use a 5-year forecast, it's historical data. So it actually benefits our residents because it's historical data and it's matter of fact. It's based on fact and not opinion.
So
You're
we
just
can see
meeting
what's
or
coming around the
exceeding
corner,
something.
you know,
Right.
so we had a difference of, we were ready to give 2.5, but what they needed was, what was it, 9? 9?
Right, but at least we could give factual data.
If I might, the biggest impact is upon the department heads,
Right.
truly, in the process. Because if I use 2.5% in building the budget, I bring a budget in that is, based upon the assumptions we present, balanced. We can discuss whether backfills and some others constitutes balance, but if everything goes just right according to plan, it's balanced. If I'm using 2.5%, but it consistently is 4,
Right.
I am over budgeting the departments. I am presenting every year a budget that
Doesn't
allocates 1.5% extra to departments that they're never gonna get.
Right.
So the closer we can be to a number that you're comfortable with, that means the tighter I can make that general fund budget, which then becomes what it is, and you have to, there'll still be the arm wrestling with the district, but it's more realistic of what we think we can accomplish during the course of the year on the general fund side.
And we already have everything completed on the revenues and expense side. It's just a matter of getting that number for the schools in order to show that graph that we presented before, where we could see the revenues and expenses and where they're gonna land in each fiscal year.
Terry, the things that affect a taxpayer are a debt exclusion and an override. When we go to submit a balanced budget, it's, if we need an override, then we would say to the taxpayer, we don't have enough money, we want an override, but we haven't done that.
Okay,
The school did that, and they got a resounding no.
right.
If a debt exclusion cannot be used for operating expenses, it can only be used for a capital.
Yep.
It has to be used for something specific.
Okay.
So if somebody asks you, can you do a debt exclusion for your operating budget, the answer is no. You can do an override for your,
Yeah.
but
And then
that's
that goes
what
to the
affects the
voters,
taxpayer.
and that
If
goes
we
to the
present
voters.
them with a balanced budget with no override, it doesn't affect the taxpayer.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
we're allowed
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
raise the limit 2.5%,
right,
because that's what the law says.
right. Out of our budget that we already have the money, it's just where do we wanna put it?
So if it's $1 million, then you get
Right.
another 250,000,
Okay,
okay? Right, if I did my numbers right, because I'm not a good mathematician, sorry.
And I don't want to release something that's not
barring.
Right, and
Accurate.
you're trying to go by our guidance.
By your
So
guidance.
you're asking,
Yeah.
which,
Is that enough discussion?
So on January 11, we hope to.
sorry, I'm just trying to teach you.
Excuse me, January 9, we hope to close the loop on that, so we can get you that 5-year projection.
Okay.
And also so that I can bring you the amendment to the financial management policy.
Okay.
In your weekly report,
Yep.
if I might, Mr. Chairman, item E, D, I'm sorry. If we can move on to that.
Yes.
So I call it a
I don't
tick
think that we
list.
needed any other.
I call it a tick list just because annually we are to review the financial management policy and propose any revisions that are needed. With codification having passed,
Yep.
I now need to go through, and we're referred to Article
Yep.
bippity-boppity-boo
Yep.
in Roman
Check.
numerals. I need to import the current numbering. There's some format and type issues here and there. There's a provision in there that says we should try to be funding the stabilization out of the OpEx account in every budget. We should be trying to contribute 0.5%. I think we need to, that was aspirational. It could certainly remain as aspirational, but if it's just not realistic at all,
What are the
is
other
there really
sources?
any sense in having it in there? It would mean we'd have to cut operating expenses by roughly $50,000 a year to make a contribution from the operating budget to the stabilization fund.
What are the sources for the stabilization fund?
Currently, the only source for the stabilization funds is free cash.
Free cash, yeah.
The financial management policy called for us to start to use tax levy to fund it.
Which was like a whiplash
Um,
from
it-
how we
do
were.
that, but
It
we
is.
can't.
Huh?
We wanted to do that when we wrote the financial management policy, but we obviously can't. It was a goal.
Yeah,
but-
it was a goal to try to have a steady source of income as opposed to simply relying upon free cash. Following on that, again, it was aspirational. You have to remember that the financial management policy was written at a time when the town's finances were,
But that's exactly what I'm saying. It
Probably
was a
as low as you
whiplash
could go.
effect to say we have to put something in there,
we
and they took
want
what
to
they
try
could.
to, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree with trying to.
So the operating
normalize
reserve
that.
is set at 5% of the general, of the total budget, which is, because you're not in a school district, frankly, it's only about $800,000. One more year, you're gonna be there. At the same time, I have to be honest with you, an $800,000 stabilization, if you faced a 3-year economic downturn, is.
It wouldn't be enough.
It's nothing.
Nothing.
And the CapEx reserve at 1% of the budget is only 160,000. That barely replaces one 6-wheeler. I didn't use an example of a 10-wheeler, Jeff.
Excuse me, the 6-wheeler was 234 too.
Was that the 6 or the 10?
So
We just went over that, on the price list, 234.
Well, that ain't happening on my watch, I'll tell you that.
Ain't on mine either.
We know because of the discussion a couple of weeks ago that we need to add money donations to the section on grants, because it
Yep.
speaks only to grants.
Yep.
So we know we need to add money donations, and we know we need to add
Yeah, what, are you looking
Yes.
for language there?
So, not looking for language, I'm just looking
Other
for
stuff
a
that
tick
needs to be
list.
fixed.
You know,
Yeah.
are
That you
there
see.
other items of concern to people so that I have as complete a list as possible? Don't need them now, but would appreciate them over the next few weeks.
Could any of the recommendations Roselli made be in that tick list?
And I already have Selectman Bennett's, the ones that we already chatted about.
Yeah, like Facebook, they all think he's,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Could any of Mr. Roselli's management letter things be in the financial policy?
Network security is not really financial
No.
management, and I suppose it is. The fraud prevention measures, I've made a note to reach out to Tony and ask him if he can refer to me to some communities that he thinks do it well. I couldn't write anything frankly until I had something to work with. The lease accounting, the interest income allocations, these are accounting issues, maximizing investment returns, closing checklists. We do need a policy on the indirect costs. We really, I have to respectfully disagree. I really need to clear the deck of transferring the collections.
Yep. I understand.
It took 15 years to get that done. I'd like to get that up and running well before we tackle the next
Yep.
issue. We actually have a ambulance write-off policy in the financial management. We need to simply get it to the chief. We'll go through it, Terry, and if there's something there that's,
Well, I
Yes.
was looking at the
the,
free cash
the,
thing.
the cash turnover and protection,
Yeah,
I have a
that one.
draft. It's my fault. I simply have it, every time I pick it up, something else lands. But we'll add the turnover policy to the list for the financial management policies.
That'll be good.
So that's what we're trying to get to, just if there's something that, if from the advisory committee as well, if you see something that you think just doesn't feel right, needs some revision, or we've missed, by all means.
Yeah, some of these, I think, at least they can start in policy. You know, whether it has a procedure to go along with it, like looking at the last page, collect cash from department heads weekly.
Right.
Well, he said when you streamline, when you move capital projects money over to account, we'll see more interest. In the general fund increase from 10,000 to 50,000.
We've already done that.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, that accounting adjustments.
Oh, okay.
We had held the interest in the capital project, but the town had not voted to authorize the spending of the interest upon the project, so that really should have been monthly credited to the general fund interest account, instead of being retained in the capital projects.
I'm good with the list otherwise.
We'll start writing, in early January to have these in your
Yeah.
budget book for February, so if I could get anything by February 1,
Okay.
or strike that, that's too late, January 1. That
Now,
would
are
be
you going to
helpful.
run projections on, like, your OpEx, CapEx reserves? Are you going to run projections, or are you looking for input for that?
Just looking for input as to whether or not you think that should be adjusted. I think that we could easily move it up 2 points, 2.5 points. I mean, in my
Yeah,
last community,
Then you and I are, I mean, that's
We-
what I
we-
was thinking.
in my last community, we kept it at 12%.
Yeah. I had jotted down 8 and 2.5.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I agree with Mike on that.
The other thing on the capital is the capital should really be sized to your asset base
Uh-huh.
as opposed to your operating budget.
That's-
And
yeah,
when we
that's-
wrote
that's
the
actually a
financial
very good point.
management policy, we didn't have that. So if we can get a better handle on our fixed assets and our infrastructure, then we should size the reserve as a percentage of that.
Right. Yeah, you know, a moment ago, you just talked about capability as well, too, and that's, tying it to it, you know, whatever our, I don't know what our real property, not a real property, our, capital, you know, dollar amount would be, but to tie it, to say, you know, what kind of percentage are you trying to maintain a balance for? So if, like, we had $50 million in capital assets, and we were trying to maintain a certain percentage because that was going to give us a good indication, but I think that's good, but I also, you know, like Bob was talking about the 10-wheeler, it was $230,000 if we needed to be able to, I don't know, those go into the discussions.
So
But
again,
good
just
list.
by January 1,
Sure.
I'm sure Jeff will.
Terry's comment
I
about
sent him
adding.
something earlier today. I'm sure he and I will have a discussion or two.
I haven't bothered you for 48 hours.
Because we've been plowing.
I did-
I think Terry, you know, Terry's quick glance at some of these things, if they can be turned around into a.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's a good
Yep.
point, too.
I'll
While
do that.
the ink is still wet. Okay. Adam, are you briefing the debrief?
Well, since I was involved with the survey,
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Terenzini wanted to do this one, but I'll take it. I mean, if you,
Well, I'm just asking, we're ready to move on to the next.
Good night,
See you,
thank you
Bob.
for your input.
Thank you for coming. Yeah,
Take care,
either way, I
Mr.
just was
Cooper.
ready to move on
See
to
you
the next
tomorrow.
agenda.
See you tomorrow.
I mean, I will take this if you don't mind.
you wanna take this one? Okay.
We just, so by way of example, we had some people say, well, geez, that wasn't a very well-attended meeting. So we did have, ask Carol to go back through the town meetings for the last 5 years. 70 people at the fall town meeting is only one less than a year ago.
Yeah.
It is 4 more than 2 years ago. It's far short from 3 years ago. So you can see they pop all over the place, whether it's the annual or the fall or a special.
Oh,
And they're driven mostly by what's the issue at stake.
Yeah.
So you can see when there was monies for the school up, the police station, some other things, they popped. But what we really wanted to try to get from you, again, we don't need it now, was people said they wanted the earlier hour, they wanted the motions shorter. We had some folks say, well, I don't really know what I'm voting for, but the voter's guide has what I think is a fairly succinct summary. So maybe we should be putting that summary up on the screen. Certainly, we're gonna reach out to Tony and say, you know, is there any way that we can try to make sure the pre-town meeting is done a little bit earlier, so that I can have these books ready at least a week before the annual town meeting, so we can get the books out on the counters, we can get them out on the web a little bit earlier. We're just looking for people to think about what seemed to go well, what can we do you think, to keep trying to improve? Because the attendance numbers, it's gonna come down to what's on the agenda.
I think,
Pretty much.
I think
Diane?
our town meetings go much smoother than they used to. I think, you know, we have the information up on the overhead projector. I think that we have stuff out on the website that people can read. I know not everybody has access to the internet, but I mean, most of the feedback that I get is positive, not negative. You know, Jeff had pointed out to me that the Board of Selectmen don't even have to come to meetings, and we do, it's just tradition. I mean, we waived the readings at this meeting, and I didn't hear any complaints about that at all from anybody in the audience that was there that spoke to me. I mean, they're right there in the voter's guide, they're word for word.
we go to the same meeting.
What?
Did we go to the same meeting? People wanted the warrant. Some people wanted the
Some,
warrant.
but they all voted, they said no.
Right, over,
So the people did not want that.
yeah,
So, otherwise they would have said yes.
right.
And I think that people just, they want to go home and they want to get through the meeting and just discuss the topic at hand.
Yeah,
And, I think that we put a lot more people are watching our meetings on YouTube, so they have access to the information ahead of time. People tell me that they watch the advisory committee meetings, and they have more information that way. And I just think that things go more smoothly, much more so than they used to.
I think you get three types of people in town. The ones who don't go to town meeting. You get the ones who do go to town meeting because they feel it's their civic duty.
Yep,
And then there's the ones that go to town meeting and enjoy it.
I like it.
Where it's more, they're doing their civic duty, but they're taking part in the process, so they want to hear.
Right.
I really hesitate to use the word theater, but it's enjoyable. They want to hear that process go through it. It's not enjoyable if people are going there and we're saying heretofore and, it's up on the screen and they have the voter guide. I agree, it did feel a little awkward, but it did get through and we got our business done and the people were informed. I don't find fault with people enjoying, I like the civic process, I've been involved with it for years, so.
Me too.
In whatever community I was in, so I get the people that said, that's crap, I wanted to hear that stuff read. And then I think Jeff you made the point, I don't remember if it was in one of these meetings or if it was online, where you were like, if you're researched ahead of time, it's not an issue.
And also, if you go to town meeting and you don't understand something, or you're not
Yeah.
sure of what you're voting on,
Yep.
and you should know this just as part of your responsibility, to know the process that you can participate in. You simply go down to the front, Mr. Moderator, what the hell are you asking us to vote on? Just plain and simple, ask the moderator, what are you asking of us? Because I don't understand the motion. Or they didn't read the whole motion, so does it are we voting on what's in this book, what's in this piece of paper? You simply just go down and ask.
Yeah.
Rather than sit there, let's see, I'm not sure what it is, so how the hell, I'm just gonna vote for it, or I'm just gonna go no, because I'm not sure. If you wanna know what you're voting on, go down and ask the moderator. It'll get explained to you. Ms.
Yeah.
Moderator, can you read this motion to me and explain to me what you're asking of us? And that's part of the moderator's responsibilities, this town meeting times, which is something I would like to ask, could be done, if possible. Get, instead of all the residents having, it's $25. I bought 2 of them. And it takes no time at all to get it. Mr. Pape lives in Spencer, Sterling. You call him up, you can email him, whatever. But, and that's the guidebook for our town meetings. And I don't think every resident should have to go out and spend $25. Something, and I'm gonna look into to do this, but I would like to see possible. I'll buy one, cut the binding
you
out
mean
and
the
scan it
copyright?
and get a copy of it on the website, Town Meeting Times. And I know if I take the book apart and scan it, that's gonna be a chore for somebody, but that's how strongly I feel.
It could be helpful if they read it.
Well, again,
Yeah.
but,
So,
Blah, blah, blah.
But
Harvey, just before, the other piece that I did forget, I said there's 3, the people that don't, the people that go for their civic duty, and the people that enjoy it. Well, the other one that you mentioned is the people that care about an issue, and that's what causes, looking at your debrief sheet here, that's what's gonna cause your swell in voting. And as frustrating as it must be, or can be to us, that you can't anticipate, certainly if it has to do with the school or money or something like that, but that certainly sends it out of swing. But I didn't want to forget that fact as well, really, that 4th category. Yes, please.
If I can go back to
What Jeff was
Jeff's
saying, the
point.
town meeting.
I thought about this the other day, and I just didn't get a chance to send Derek the email yet, but one is, we're gonna get an additional copy and have it in the library. But we are asking Derek to check with the Moderators Association, see if they would allow us to post it on the web. I'd like to think they would. They don't do this for profit. They simply charge the printing costs. But I do think we should at least seek permission. I'm Catholic, so I understand forgiveness in the confessional, but in this instance, I think seeking permission ahead
How
of time.
many pages is it?
It's easy to
Would be a
beg
good-
forgiveness than
What's
ask
the books
permission.
about that thick?
I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
125
something like that.
pages.
I forget.
I'll email you the total of pages as soon as I get home.
Okay,
But,
mine's in my office.
It's
I bought
not,
one
it's
too.
not horrible, it's not horribly lengthy.
yeah, it's,
Um,
I say, I don't know if, how many people will read it, but if it's the guidebook and you cite it, I just think it would be, just, if we can do that and just get it on there, then it would be say, look, you don't understand this, go here, and here's where it at.
Well, it's what we tell people that we
Yeah.
follow. I believe it was actually at the fall town meeting, someone said, are you following Rogers' rules?
Robert's
Robert's,
rules.
sorry,
Rules.
Robert's
Yep.
rules.
No, we follow
Oh,
town
or-
meeting times.
Right, exactly, so
It's the
there was
bylaw.
some confusion.
Right.
Rogers' rules, that's the Army Rangers, sorry.
Rogers Rangers, that's right.
Roger Dodger.
Got it on the
No, it
brain.
ain't no Roger Dodger.
So we've thought about making sure it's the summary that's up on the screen, not the motion, not the article, it's the summary, so that it's larger, people can be reading it. Perhaps they might pay more attention to it there, if we can make town meeting time more available. I did run out of time this fall and I didn't get it done, but normally I try to do a question time before each meeting. Steve Castle interviews me, we go through the various articles. I think we need to make that a standing offer. And then I have talked with the staff about maybe trying to do the Finance 101 and a town meeting 101. So that if people want to, how do I make an amendment? Here's how you do it.
There you
What if I have this question? So that we can maybe, even if we had only 6 or 8 people attending, because they could perhaps school their neighbor, school the person who's sitting next to them. And the more we can spread the procedural means of having things done, or the Amanda, I can't pronounce her last name correctly, who sent us the proposed amendment to the
Susie?
zoning bylaw. Susie, perhaps, yes? We're able to get that to town council, yes, that's legal. Amanda, sure, would have it written up. And, we would encourage you to have 200 copies available as people come in the door. So the staff suggested that we do that in April, when we were much closer to the town meeting. But if there are other things that we can be doing,
I have a wild idea.
we would like to know what your thoughts are, so we can try to get them into the
I
mill.
have a wild idea. What if we did an audio book?
What?
I listen to audiobooks all the time. What if we did an audio book? Would it cost a lot of
Of
money?
town meeting times?
Yes.
It would cost a lot of money and people would fall asleep, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well,
I listen to Audible books too, and I wouldn't listen to that. What about, if I can say something,
Please.
there needs to be some sort of educational process to be put in place. One, when you approach the town, what the town has to offer you. When you're buying a house in town is a good time to do that. But also an approach where it explains what the purpose of town meeting is, how it's a legislative body. Nobody teaches that nowadays. You don't know until you have a problem, and you kind of do it backwards.
Well, just for those who watch these kinds of things, the state did adopt a new addition to the education frameworks in which all school districts have to offer a new education class on, back in the day, it was civics. I don't remember exactly what they called it.
American
There are
government.
implementation grants. We did send that to the superintendent earlier today, saying, And if there's something that we can do, sending in, so in one community, the chair of the select board and I would go in and speak to the local high school class once a year kind of thing. So certainly we'll cooperate with the school district in suing the state for another unfunded mandate. Oh, that was a different line of thought.
But even
Faith, so you talk about the
education of
citizens, there's a
adults.
Citizens Academy, we've talked about that before. We, when we were on the advisory committee, that was one of the workshops that we attended.
Even if there
up
was
at
like
Devon's.
a page for new residents where it explains all the different,
Or a welcome
what you
packet,
can
if
find
you're
at
moving.
town office, what
I
you're
think there
looking
may
for,
be
here's
something.
some links.
I believe
Just
there
something
is a welcome to
educational.
the community. I know some of the stuff, the links may be a little bit stale or otherwise, but there is, I know what you're talking about, and there is limited resources that we do have that say, welcome to, Templeton or otherwise, but I agree with you. We became friendly with a family down on Hubbardston and the new division down there, and it's the same kind of thing, welcome to town. They're from California. They don't know what Board of
Right.
Selectmen is. I said I'm from the Board of Selectmen. They probably thought I was trying to sell them Amway or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point to make.
In one community, we had a new residence package. I can talk with Carol about that. It does take some time and effort
Yeah.
to put together and then to maintain.
Or even something that winds up, we have like a temporary or whatever, where you're basically pulling things together. We have a lot that's out there, like an info sheet on Veterans Office or something like that, but like when someone comes to the community and they wander into the town hall, we're like, hey, welcome to the community. Here's Mike Curry's cell phone number.
We'll talk with
Just one other thing. I'm a lifelong resident of this town. I've lived here since I was not quite 3. I would have never gone to a welcome to your new house packet. I only know about town government like this because in high school I was on the representative to the Board of Selectmen. I was the student representative, so I went to all the meetings for 3 years of high school.
Wow.
Good times. But I think because I knew about it, I'm not a quiet, reserved person. I used to tell other students to come with me, hey, did you register to vote? Because men have to register to vote, but women don't. Women don't register with selective service. All the boys are told you have to go when you turn 18.
Right.
And sometimes the girls will go. And I have daughters. That's how I know. I was the one who brought my kids over here. So I think there are many things at play here, and I appreciate that there's going to be, a paper document or some sort of thing that people have when they come in to register to vote or whatnot. But don't forget about the ease of having fresh links, updating your links, getting everything current. And I didn't know that Town Meeting Times wasn't anywhere on the internet. That seems hard for me to believe in this day and age. But some fresh links and then pushing it out on the proper social media channels. I don't mean me going to my page and blasting it and having everyone share it. Put it on the appropriate town pages, and utilizing different social media streams if we have them, if that's appropriate. My kids are the next generation. They're not on Facebook because their mom is on Facebook. They're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they're on these other things. Just starting to open a little bit of those doors where a fresh link on our website is going to be more easily shared than, I think it's here, I'm not sure. Because people who don't know what they're looking for aren't going to keep investigating. They're not going to say, oh, this link is broken. Let me see if I can figure that out. They're going to be like, oh, that doesn't work. That's stupid. This one doesn't either. Forget it. Forget about it. I'm not going to go to any old meeting. That's silly. Because 300 people at a town meeting with 8,000 people in town is a disgrace. And people need to come to meeting. And if they don't understand that things happen at meeting, I educated adults who are older than me. Like, why should I go to town meeting? I'm like, why should you not go? Like, it happens. It happens there. Well, I vote. Great. You have to go in person and vote. Like, business is done here. And people still, even older folks, they still don't get it. That we're still doing this government. This is real. And this is how our town is run. when people just forget, or don't know, or never knew, or they
And
live
we
in
don't have
California.
a student representative anymore, huh?
Yes, we do. We have two of them.
To this
Where are
body?
they?
Oh, not here, not for Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, that's what she said she
Yeah.
was
You
on
did
the.
it for the
she
Board of
was-
Selectmen?
Yeah, I went to everything.
Yeah, we haven't had one for quite some time.
Well,
Well,
that's an,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
an
I'm not
action
18
item.
anymore.
Darn, Amy.
That'd be cool if every
thank you.
board had a student rep, planning board, zoning board. I mean, that would be so, for the kids' sake, that would be valuable.
If that is
Dreams.
something that you're interested in encouraging, I can suggest that to the superintendent when I meet with him
Great
tomorrow. As
idea.
another
Yeah, I
manner
would say
in
an
which the
extension of like
boards
the
could
Citizen Academy,
cooperate.
to
That's a
try
great
and
idea.
do like a multi,
Yep.
I think it could be included within that as an
Happy to
annex.
raise it.
Yeah.
They can get community service hours for attending too.
That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Did
I
you get
agree
credit
with
for
Some of your
that.
meetings are long. I didn't, but that wasn't a thing. When I graduated high school, we didn't have to have community service hours to
They have
graduate.
200, Gardner's, I know Gardner, because I
Yeah,
helped.
a
to
lot
get
of schools have them.
200
Mhm.
community service.
Okay.
That's
Mr.
it.
Terenzini, anything else?
That's all I have tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we've got, I'd like to have a brief discussion on open meeting law, item F. Jeff, I've got just brief, do you have anything this evening to say on it?
Well, yes.
Do you
Just-
mind if I go
just-
first?
Go ahead.
All right. So, open meeting law, I
didn't
I
sign one.
absolutely do not mean, I want to say it for the entire board. Please make sure your open meeting law
Bye, Amy.
training is up. Say again?
I just said bye to Amy.
Oh,
Bye, Amy.
see ya. On the board, please make sure that your open meeting law certificate is up to date. And if you don't know, Holly keeps a copy of the certificates, yes, if you need to find out if
Is
they're
that this
current or
one?
not. It's, you gotta take the online training, but make sure that you're aware of it.
Oh, okay.
The second thing I'll say about open meeting law is be aware of it. Diane and I have known each other for many years now, and we continually remind each other about open meeting law, whether we're talking about social media, text messaging, or otherwise. I think when I say be aware, we as a board need to be aware that we are being watched all the time because we're the representatives of the community, elected representatives of the community, and they want us to follow the process, so we have to make sure that we're cognizant of that. So the last thing I would say before I hand it over to Jeff, if you are speaking for the board, then you should also know that the board should have knowledge or prior discussion of what you're talking about.
That's correct.
Because if you're already going out and you're speaking on the board, and myself included, or myself as the example of, I should always think through, have I discussed this with my board first? And I went dangerously along the edges of that in one of our meetings when we were discussing dates or times, and I was getting ahead of myself. So those are the three items that I just want to make sure that, as we talk about it as agenda item tonight for the camera and otherwise, I would like the board to remain completely cognizant of open meeting law as a duty to yourselves and to your constituents. Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
Okay, first off, my little rant email that I sent off, and it was just to get everyone's attention that ad hoc committees are covered by the open meeting law. You have to have an agenda, you have to post it, you have to list it, you have to have minutes and all those things. Cause I saw one email comment and saying, you should be aware of this. Another requirement of the open meeting law is, and that, this, in the back of, you go online or you print it out like I do, there is a certificate there that within 14 days of you being elected, appointed, whatever, you are supposed to fill this out and say that you have a copy, you have the open meeting law, you have access to it, you looked at it, you've read it, you understand it, you agree you will follow it, you agree you will keep up with any of its changes. And it's the same thing as the state ethics test that you have to take within 14 days. And you go online and you take the thing and you print out a copy and you turn it in to the town clerk. And speaking on this, that is the ethics liaison's responsibility, to keep track of all of this stuff. The state has a requirement, you have to keep the records for 6 years. If they come looking, where's your records? That liaison is supposed to have them. He's supposed to, remind you, not only if you have it within 14 days, but every year they have to send that in, and every 2 years you have to retake the ethics test, just so you keep abreast of it. There are a lot of things on, like, town meeting, it's not covered by the open meeting law. That's why the selectmen can sit up here, two of them, and read the warrants and chat, because they've ruled for some reason. An attorney general has not yet concluded that that town meeting is covered. It's just been something they've just kinda left alone. They're not gonna mess with that. So it's important just to be cognizant of the fact, just because it's an ad hoc committee, or it's just gonna be a committee of a couple, 3 people, as soon as you say ad hoc, whether it's a quorum or not, quorum of the selectmen advisory committee, if you're gonna have an ad hoc committee together, it's covered by open meeting law, and you have to follow all the same procedures. You can't be meeting at somebody's house, unless you wanna invite all these people over and have all the requirements of having them there. You have to meet in appropriate places. And it's easy to miss and to go amiss of it. And you don't always get, you're not always gonna get spanked really hard, especially if it was unintentional. You say, oh, you know what, damn. And, my experience with the Attorney General is, they don't really come down hard on you, unless it's intentional and it's, you repeat yourself, and especially as a board does it, then they come down on you. You as an individual, and I'm speaking from my own personal experiences, generally, the Attorney General, they give you a nudge and say, look, come on, this is what you have to do. We suggest you do this, and there is they have some online courses. You can take them, some of them are video, some of them are just written stuff, just to keep you cognizant of the fact. And try to keep you, out of trouble, so to speak. With regards to social media and blogs and things like that, and I went to the Attorney General, I have the emails, I asked some specific questions about posting things and this and that, and it surprised me, the response. I was not in violation, and I was not in any trouble, as far as the open meeting law and what I posted on a blog or did on Facebook. Again, I have those, I printed them out, I keep them. But I did check on that, and in my specific situation, no, you don't have to do this, and you did not do that, because I compared Facebook to, if I write a letter to the editor, all my board can read it. What if somebody responds to it in the newspaper? I see city councilors of Gardner do it, multiple times. It's the same thing. They read your letter to the editor, your opinion on something, and they write a response to it. It's the same thing, same principle, just a different medium. So, but the big thing is, when you get elected or appointed, you fill out the certificate and turn it in. It's a requirement, and then it falls on, now it's gonna be Mr. Terenzini's responsibility to make sure that all of this stuff is up to date and it's kept in a record. And he's not deciding ethics complaints. He's not even, if I file an ethics complaint about Adam LaMontagne, then I'm gonna call up Mr. Terenzini. Are you aware of this ethics thing that this guy is supposedly doing? That's not how ethics work. And again, I speak from experience by filing ethics complaints or inquiries. The liaison is 99% of it is keeping track of records, keeping all us little boys and girls in line. And where are your records, Mr. Ethics Liaison? I mean, that's what he's gonna deal with.
Where are your records, Mr. Ethics
I only
Liaison?
had 40 things to do this week, and I blew that 39th one off, I'm sorry. But no, that's what ethics liaison does. He's not,
All right.
people are under the
I
misconception.
don't see that on my agenda.
There is a thing in there, though,
Matters of concern?
Yeah,
Topics-
Matters of concern.
topics that the,
we voted on that 2 weeks ago.
topics
Other
that the
matters of
chairman
concern.
does not reasonably anticipate,
All right, I'm just
you know,
giving you a
on
hard
the
time.
agenda
Yeah.
is not gonna be an open
Can I
meeting
just
law
say one thing
violation.
after Jeff is done?
And we took no action,
open
so you're all set
It
there.
has something to do with what you said.
Okay, before we get off the, open meeting law discussion, Diane?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Mike made a comment about, I better let my board know, and about being a Board of Selectmen. Over time, when you've been a selectman long enough, residents no longer look at you as a resident. You are a Board of Selectmen, and you need to conduct yourself accordingly.
I agree. Yep, because something goes wrong, they wanna reach out and,
Well, you said when you're speaking,
yeah,
you're speaking as a Board of Selectmen.
Oh, I see
They're
what
not
you're saying.
necessarily
Yep.
looking at you as a resident, you are a Board of Selectmen.
right.
So when you said like,
You
when I'm
can't partition it.
talking,
Yeah, yeah,
you're talking as a Board of Selectmen, that's how people are looking at you.
yep. So keep your training up to date, be aware, when you're speaking board, the board should have had knowledge or prior discussion. We're gonna move on to the last, item that we have tonight is other matters of concern. I'd just like to kick it off by saying, we've had 2 feet of snow in the past day. I'd like to thank Bob Skozik and his team and all the contractors that we have, for being out there. Long days,
Long nights.
long nights, lots of equipment out there, lot of challenges. I understand that, and I did receive some traffic this morning, email traffic about the new school. It's a new school. It's 2 feet of snow. I think we're trying to get through some of the growing pains with the snow removal in that area. It's an ongoing discussion. But what I would say to people, when you got 2 feet of snow out there, please be safe. Understand that when you take that corner, that you can't see around the corner. You've got to slow down a little bit. Think of your fellow Templetonians and the fact that we got to just slow down a little bit. And the winter's upon us. Winter is coming. It's already in our rearview mirror a little bit. So please, for everybody out there, we'll do the best that we can as a town, and you do the best you can as a citizen driving responsibly. Thank you. Is there any other matters of a concern that we wish to discuss tonight?
I heard that the Colonial Christmas went very well, and that the residents were very happy, and thank you,
Yes.
Mike, for going to represent.
Yep. Terry and I were there.
I didn't see Terry in the pictures, but
The,
thank you for
the
going.
band, we almost forgot to thank for the band. They were outstanding.
Oh, the stilt walkers, we're lucky to have that family to do that every year. It was originally the Jack Frost Festival, so the tallest one, Brennan, he's
Yeah.
Jack Frost, and then his sister was the Angel, and we forgot to thank them too, because there was icy conditions, and
Oh, yeah.
they're faithful every year. And, some traditions are worth keeping. That's an art, a skill, and it's so impressive to little kids. Picture a 2-year-old standing next to the, it's really cool that they do that, and, again, thank you to
Yep,
them.
Thank you. Dan? Good?
Yes, I just wanted to say,
Yeah. It was nice, and we had snow. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second?
Oh, yeah, second.
All in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, we are adjourned at